And you will find that this is a thread running through all of what they do. A major goal of their movement is to establish the homosexuals and the lesbians as just as respectable, just as entitled to rights and privileges under our system as husbands and wives. Most of the state legislatures of the IWI conferences passed resolutions demanding the right of lesbians to teach in the schools and to adopt children. This is a major goal of their movement. They also want to prevent the schools from taking any action or dismissing any teacher, not only if she's a lesbian, but even if she's having an illegitimate baby, or whether she's having an abortion, or whatever. It makes no difference. You can't make any moral judgment on people. They call that sex discrimination.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Jen. This is Fundy Fridays, and here on my channel I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism, American conservative politics, pop culture, and gay stuff. And boy do we have some gay stuff to talk about today. First off, I'm gonna give you a little preview. We are launching a whole Pride collection, and I will tell you more about that at the very end of the video, but the shirt I am wearing is a part of that. So meet the Pride Month demon. I think his name is Rudy, we've decided. Yeah, I know. My best friend from childhood, Gweepers, she's a tattoo artist, and she's always been like really amazing at art, and she made this little Cupie for us, and I had to. I've been wanting to do a Pride Month demon for a long time, and she knocked it out of the park. As well as, I'll give you one more preview. Can you believe it? I can barely believe it. And I even made sure to put the little heart over her eye. If you know, you know. So stick around to the end of the video, because we got some cool stuff. It should also probably be on the website by now, so if you want to look at that while you watch the video, that's also fine. Oh yeah, it's been quite a few weeks since we've had a video out for a couple reasons. Number one, James was supposed to have his Linda McMahon video out 2 weeks ago, and then we were going to do part 2, but then WWE blocked the video worldwide, and so we had to do a complete reconfiguration, and so that should be out next week. That's fine, because it gave me time to work on this episode. The comments were off for 2 days. They might still be off, I don't know. It's very annoying. On my 8 passengers video, because I had some issues with a troll, and I got so paranoid that I turned off comments completely on the channel. Then I turned them back on, but it didn't catch up, and YouTube is like really rickety, so I don't know. That's why that video has limited comments, even though I have to go through and approve all of them. You guys didn't do anything wrong, God knows, but that's why that happened. I know people were confused, and you're confused, I'm fucking confused. So, and then finally, somebody left a comment on that video that I investigated. They said there was 30 mid-roll ads. And so I looked in the section where you can place mid-roll ads, and YouTube had put, I shit you not, literally more than 30. It was like every minute there was a mid-roll ad. So I am so sorry if you had to experience that. That sounds like hell. I removed all mid-roll ads from that video, so it shouldn't be a problem. I am so sorry. I thought there was gonna be one. I thought they were gonna just put one in the center. No, there really was 30. So if you were the person who left that comment, I see you, you are valid, and there really was too many damn ads, and I am sorry. Today we are going to be talking about Phyllis Schlafly. And my apologies to who, I don't know, but I am probably going to say her name wrong throughout the video, because for some reason my brain just removes the first L and I just say Schlafly. That's not her name. It's Schlafly, S-C-H-L-A-F-L-Y, and I had to learn that by writing it so many times, but it's Schlafly. Yes, like the beer, Yes, that will come up later. It's a whole thing. And I think today is technically, I would consider this Missouri business. We have a playlist about all the terrible things that happen in this state.
Except for the Precious Moments Museum episode. That one is a positive ray of sunshine in the hellscape that is Missouri business.
Because Phyllis is from St. Louis. So it's wild when I read about her, like places she went and like stuff she did, because I'm like, oh, I know where that is. Phyllis was I hate to say it, a genius at political organizing and strategizing, and she is probably, I believe, the reason why the Equal Rights Amendment did not pass. And not only that, she was like terrible in every other realm. Before she got involved with the cause of anti-feminism, she was a war hawk. Like, she advocated for so much nuclear war. Like, she really, really wanted us to be nuked up. And we will talk about that. She also was the campaign manager for a Republican man in the 40s. I feel like she would have probably been one of the first women to ever successfully manage a political campaign. And then she ran for Congress in 1952 and I think again in the 60s, and she did not win, thank God. But it didn't really matter. She proved that things in Washington are not necessarily done with the voters' choice in mind. You know, a lot of things in politics are done in backroom deals, and they're done through networking and things like that. And that's what she did. She was I kid you not, a grassroots organizer. She mobilized a very powerful voting bloc, which was white conservative women. And like, she was incredibly successful in helping the Republican Party further their cause. She helped shape the religious right into the monster that it is today. And this is 10 years before the moral majority, although she was friends with the Falwells. And Howard Phillips, who is the father of Doug Phillips from Vision Forum, and they worked together, and Howard Phillips was also a part of the moral majority. It is all linked together. It's wild. I didn't know. And I think it's so interesting because I thought naively that the trad wife movement started in the 2010s. And if you remember the Ballerina Farm clickbait title, Trad Wife Final Boss, then this video is trad wife origins, okay? She has been saying the same shit, spreading the same propaganda, and really setting women back since the 60s. Although she was, like I said, politically active in the 40s as well, but evil never dies, so she lived a very long time. And with her final breath, and I'm not even joking, this was like 2 days before she died, she endorsed Donald Trump. And I learned throughout the research of today's video how similar the 1964 American elections were to 2016, and how similar Barry Goldwater and Donald Trump were. We're gonna talk about all that, including like the infighting with her children and the split of Eagle Forum into the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, and they're fighting over inheritance and they're suing each other. And then, like I said, there's the cousins who started the beer company, and then one of her sons sued them over the name. And
there's also the Hulu miniseries called Mrs.America, which is a dramatized retelling of Phyllis campaigning to stop the ERA, and her family fucking hates it.
It's just, she has such a prolific life. She has been involved in politics forever, and she had a mouth on her. Like, yeah, she was very, like, into respectability, and, you know, we're better than the feminists because we're so demure, and we bake bread for the Congress people, which really happened, and we'll talk about. And it's like, if you actually listen to the stuff she was saying, she was calling feminists ugly communist lesbians, basically. She hated gay people. She was racist. She was just all around evil, but she was so good at her job. And she proved that you know, women could really have it all, right? They could have a family and a career and single-handedly, you know, mobilize a powerful voting bloc to take down constitutional amendments. Like, she was powerful. And she did all this for free. She got so much more done in the Republican Party than the men who were getting paid. She insisted that politics was just a hobby.
Of course I was working, but I wasn't employed outside the home.
So I guess let's begin. Phyllis McAlpin Stewart was born in St. Louis on August 5th, 1924. She grew up during the Great Depression, and both of her parents had to work to make ends meet. Eventually, when it was really bad, she moved to California to live with her rich uncle. So I don't know how bad she suffered, but I mean, she had to move. Her dad did random jobs, and he famously did not believe in government handouts, and so he did not accept any financial or social assistance. Her mom was a librarian at the St. Louis Art Museum for a very long time. She also worked at the Catholic school that Phyllis went to, because I forgot to mention, Phyllis was Catholic, and she united a lot of denominations and religions together with her political causes. And that is impressive, because you got to remember, like, Catholics were not popular with the Protestants, especially at the time. I mean, even JFK was Catholic, and for a long time, Protestants didn't trust him because they believed that he would be loyal to the Pope instead of loyal to American citizens. Just stuff like that. It makes me think of, honestly, I always think of Mitt Romney, because what would our lives have been like if we had had the first Mormon president?
That was a religious coalition that hadn't happened before, is that right?
I sent out appeals to the various churches, and we brought them in, and we had many rallies in Springfield, Illinois, including a great one in 1976, when I prayed we would have 1,000 people, and 1,000 people came. And we had them from all denominations. We had the Catholics, the Protestants, the Evangelicals, the Mormons, and the Orthodox Jews. We had a wonderful Chicago rabbi who testified repeatedly for us at the Illinois hearings, and I taught them all not only to be involved in the political process as volunteers, but also to work with each other. And you realize this was a time when Baptists and Catholics had never been in the same room together.
Phyllis was a really good student, and she was popular in school. She was a valedictorian, and she went on to get multiple degrees. She went to WashU in St. Louis.
It just makes me really happy that this is my job and I get to find stuff like this, because I was doing some digging on Phyllis's degrees, and I found out she did get a degree from Washington University in the 40s, but in 2008 they also gave her an honorary degree, and the students at the graduation protested Phyllis and turned their backs on her, and I found a news clip of this, and so I'm just really proud to be able to show you guys this kind of semi-rare footage.
The happiest events of their lives, but that wasn't completely the case for some WashU students at their graduation ceremony this morning.
That's because the university awarded conservative political activist Phyllis Schlafly with an honorary degree. Fox News' Summer Knowles joins us now with the show of opposition. Summer?
Well, guys, with these anti-Schlafly flyers in hand, white armbands, and even equal rights pins on their robes in some cases, students, parents, and even some professors engaged in a silent protest at this morning's graduation.
I have the privilege of presenting Phyllis Stewart Schlafly.
A lot of people felt that honoring Schlafly was inappropriate, and they silently voiced that opinion by turning their backs to Schlafly as she accepted her award. Now, the reason for their protest, the political activists built a career speaking out against women in the workforce, encouraging them to stay at home. Now, Schlafly, who holds both a bachelor's and law degree from WashU, rose to prominence in the 70s after she helped defeat the Equal Rights Amendment. The university issued a statement saying it grants honorary degrees to individuals who have become part of the broad public discourse on vital issues of the times. Schlafly said she anticipated about 30 out of 1,000 to protest her award today. But again, as you saw, there were hundreds.
It's just a way to not acknowledge that she's being awarded by our university.
I think it's wonderful that young people realized that there was an Equal Rights Amendment agitation, and that Phyllis Schlafly was instrumental in its not getting passed. I think it's wonderful that young people realize that this battle was fought and that the battle is not yet over.
Now, despite this morning's protest, Schlafly was very excited and honored to receive her honorary degree. Earlier this week, she called the protesters, quote, a bunch of losers. Summer Knowles, Fox 2 News.
And eventually she went to Harvard for a law degree. Although she didn't get an official degree from Harvard, she had to get it from an affiliated group of the college because Harvard at the time did not give degrees to women. I know, but she insisted there's no discrimination towards women. Her first job as a young woman was, as she called herself, a gunner. She would work at the ammunitions factory, one of the largest ammunitions factories in America, in St. Louis. It's now shut down. I think it's a parking lot. And she would make the guns and ammo.
Of course, you know, I worked my way through Washington University as a gunner on the night shift, testing 30 and 50 caliber ammunition. I worked 48 hours a week, half the time midnight to 8 in the morning and half the time 4 to midnight, and then went to college in the morning.
And how did that happen? Why did you come to do that?
Well, I had to pay the tuition, so I had to get a job. So I did, and I went and applied, went to work about my 18th birthday, and I made enough money to pay my way through Washington U, and then I saved up enough to go have a year in graduate school at Harvard.
That job was kind of like the Rosie the Riveter job, right?
Sort of, except I was in the building that was testing the ammunition. So I did all the different tests for the 30 and 50 caliber ammunition, the accuracy, the penetration, the aircraft function, and then I would examine misfires, the ones that didn't go off. I photographed tracer bullets in flight, and that's the way it was. I was trained to do that, and that was my job.
Was that the beginning of your interest in military affairs, national security?
I would say yes, it certainly was.
I don't have footage or pictures of Phyllis being a gunner, but I have like stock footage from a news report about female factory workers during World War II, so this is what I imagine she was doing.
The word equality didn't exist. It might have been in the dictionary, but that's the only place it was. We were told, there are no jobs for women, don't bother to apply.
And what did you think of that?
Well, you know, probably that was, my daughter was born in '48, and probably from the time I left the plant until '48, probably were the worst years of my life. Because what's to do in a little 4-roomed house? Tried to keep the place clean, and my husband liked his dinner on time and so on, but it wasn't enough to, you know, I've always been keen to do things, and there just wasn't a visit with the neighbors, and all the neighbors were in the same boat, so you had tea in the morning and coffee in the afternoon, and pretty dull existence. I mean, you didn't have any cash to go and take courses or anything like that, and when baby came along, I had something to do and things were better. When I was interviewed and asked what I would be doing, he said, I have no idea. It's a shell filling plant. And I said, I don't really want to make the trip to scrub toilets. And he said, it's a crapshoot. Yeah. So I was pleased to get a uniform and not have to do housework, maintenance sort of thing. I worked in cordite, filling 40 millimeter casings with cordite. It reminded me of spaghetti in a way. It came in a wooden box to the table where we were weighing, and the box was about yay by yay, And they laid in there and they looked like long pieces of spaghetti, only a little fatter. Safety was the top priority. They had safety people all over the place, being very sure that there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere, that people were following all of the rules, because one spark of electricity would cause a big problem. So we weren't allowed to wear jewelry. Some persons wouldn't take their wedding rings off, so they had to bind them with, cover them with tape so that they wouldn't create a spark.
And she wasn't against completely women having jobs. She just preferred that they had families first and got done raising them before they went to have a career. And that was very important to her, that women do things the way that she wanted them to be done.
A lot of them are happy with their choices, I'm sure. People are very different in their motivation. But by and large, if you look at the whole country, I would say most women would like to have a husband and children. If they devote their prime years of childbearing years, and when they have good looks and good figure and virtue, if they pass all those by and devote it to working 60 hours a week in a profession, time passes them by. Mm-hmm. I went to law school after I was 50, but I certainly couldn't have had my 6 children after I was 50.
In her early 20s, as a single and educated woman, she started dabbling in politics. More specifically, she was the campaign manager for a Republican out of St. Louis named Claude Bakewell.
My first venture into politics was the 1946 congressional campaign, when I ran the campaign of a Republican candidate in the city of St. Louis. And he won. That was a big Republican year. Things were simple in those days. I was the campaign manager, the speechwriter, the scheduler, and it was very victorious, and politics have been my hobby ever since.
So Claude Bakewell was an American lawyer, a U.S. representative from Missouri's 11th Congressional District, and he was also the U.S. Postmaster for St. Louis. Huh. That's interesting. He was married to a Nepo baby, I guess, technically. He was married to J.P. Morgan's niece, so I don't know if that helped him out in life, but it is interesting. And eventually, during one of the campaigns, Claude Bakewell lost to his opponent's widow. Her name was Lenore K. Sullivan. Her husband was John B. Sullivan. But it looks like Lenore was a Democrat. She was reelected 11 times. In Congress, she served for many years as the secretary of the House Democratic Caucus. She helped create the food stamp program, and she voted in favor of the Civil Rights Acts of 1957, 60, 64, and 68, as well as the 24th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was what? Anti-poll tax, and the Voting Rights Act of 65. Sullivan was one of the very few members of Congress and the only woman member of Congress to vote against the Equal Rights Amendment. Oh. So, I guess Phyllis would have liked her. She opposed abortion and called for the passage of the Human Life Amendment. Well, you know what? Women can be wrong too. So, damn. Anyway, so back to Claude Bakewell. He was the last Republican to represent a significant portion of St. Louis in the House. He was incredibly anti-communist, as a lot of people were, including Phyllis. And he called his Democrat opponent, Harry Schendel, a stooge.
I don't know what he meant by that, but it sounds like an old-timey word for something problematic. And knowing these people, I really wouldn't give them the benefit of the doubt here.
He himself was anti-segregation, but that's the bare minimum. And remember, this was the 40s. Anyway, like 2 years after that, she met her future husband, Fred Schlafly, and he was 39 and she was 25. And, you know, that's their business, I guess. But that is a significant age gap, and something that you have to think about when you have a large age gap like that is that, you know, he died like 30 years before she did, but I imagine she was not lonely because she had 6 children and, you know, an entire Republican Party to support her. But R.I.P., I guess, although I don't like Fred. I do not like him.
Your wife, we have come to know from television and radio and having an occasional conversation here, She has a very strong, dominant kind of style to the way she works. Is she the same way at home? Does she wear the pants in the family?
No, she doesn't. I'm obviously physically larger than she is.
He chins himself 25 times every morning.
And she's very submissive.
They met supposedly in the Republican community, and he had heard favorable things about her because she was so smart and interesting and beautiful and young and all that. And so they bonded over their love of politics and books. I actually learned from an interview with him that he knew about Phyllis from her Schlafly report, but he thought she was a man, and so he was pleasantly surprised.
Well, that's really how we met. I was scheduled to make the debate, and I went down to the First National Bank in St. Louis, which published a very fine newsletter, and they had published a newsletter on this subject. So I went to ask for the author of the newsletter, who I thought was a man, and it turned out to be Phyllis Schlafly. And so
that disappoint you?
No, I was thrilled, and I invited her to lunch, and the romance began.
Was it love at first sight?
Oh, absolutely.
What did you like about her first?
Well, of course, I thought she was very beautiful, but also she was extremely well informed, better than I was on many subjects, and it made a very interesting courtship and marriage.
The pair got married in October of 1949 at the St. Louis Cathedral, which is a famous, very popular, very beautiful cathedral in St. Louis. He was rich, and he was a corporation lawyer, apparently. His family also came from money. He was very supportive of Phyllis to a point. He let her have this political career as long as she made it home every night to make dinner.
Is he supportive of all or most all of the things that you believe and campaign for, as it were?
Oh, sure. Every way. Intellectually and morally and financially, and every way he's supportive. Otherwise, I couldn't do it. And it wouldn't be worth doing. Because really, you don't think getting on a plane and sleeping in a hotel in New York to be on a show like this could possibly be as much fun as the excitement of growing children and the fun of the emotional security of the family unit and the interesting personalities as children develop. That's much more fun.
It is for you, but it may not be for everybody else. There are those who would consider flying to New York and so forth and so on to be much more fun than what you're talking about.
Yeah, but not when you do it all the time.
Yeah, on a regular basis.
Oh, no, it becomes just as much a bore as any other routine job if you do it a lot.
You're very supportive of your wife. Doesn't that sort of make you a feminist?
No, I don't think so. This happens that we agree on the issues which she's debating around the country. And if I were polled on them, I would be voting the same way she's speaking.
I think what feminism does is to teach women to put well, in the first place, it's a negative outlook on life. It teaches women that they've been oppressed and discriminated against and the cards are stacked against them. And secondly, it teaches them that they should put their own self-fulfillment over every other value. Now, it's a free country for those who choose that. But I think that marriage and motherhood require a lot of social compromises because you have two people who were brought up in different homes and may have different ideas, and to get along in the family unit you have to make certain compromises. Now, I think it's worth the price because I think the rewards are so great. But I do believe that feminism teaches women to say their own self-fulfillment under their own name for their own purposes is the greatest value.
Can you see, your husband is very supportive of all your efforts, both at home and in public life. Every marriage is not like that. Every husband is not quite so in tune, perhaps, with his wife, her goals, her desires, her needs, and her potential fulfillments. Can you see the marriages and understand them where this is not the case, where you have the support of husband where other women do not, and that there might be a need for something like ERA, if not an Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, ERA is not going to make husbands refrain from being jealous or not be petty or small about things. ERA isn't going to do any of those things. You have to work with the situation you have, and people have different kinds of problems. But ERA doesn't solve any of those.
Phyllis has gone on record saying that her husband supported her whenever she ran for Congress, and she could run for whatever she wanted as long as she didn't win.
And he was very supportive of everything I did. In fact, somebody asked him one time, why do you let Phyllis run for all these offices? And he said, oh, she can run for anything she wants, just so she doesn't win.
She would start off many of her speeches by kind of poking fun at the situation. She would say, "Thank you to my husband for letting me be here tonight."
It's a very great pleasure to be invited to visit with you for a while this afternoon. And I would like also to thank my husband, Fred, for letting me come. I love to say that because it irritates the women's livers more than anything I say. I can't complain about my husband ever interfering with my civil liberties. Every time we have an argument, he always assures me of my constitutional right to remain silent.
Reporters, other politicians, they'd be like, why are you doing this when you yourself have said that you would rather be at home with the children? And she would, snap right back and be like, well, the kids have to sleep sometime, so I have time to do both.
Well, Fred is the boss of the family, and that's the way it is. And you talk about these other things that I've done, and some of them have had pleasurable aspects to them, but really nothing is as much fun as a happy long-time marriage and the fun of growing children. It really is more fun than all these other things that I do.
Then why don't you, well, your children are mostly grown. Why don't you spend more time doing that than fighting ERA then?
Well, they don't need the constant supervision. When children get in college and graduate school, they don't need mother to check up on them every minute. Yeah. However, a lot of the trips that I take so I can route myself through where they are in different parts of the country and have a visit with them.
The reporter then asks Fred if he knew what he was getting into when he started dating Phyllis, if he had expected her to be a housewife instead of a political strategist.
Would you have married Phyllis if she were going to stay at home 100% or 98% of the time and be a, quote, housewife? And I put that in quotes.
Yes, I would. I was
that's what he
very
thought
much
he was
in
getting.
love with her.
Oh, that's what he thought he was getting.
And we have 6 children, and I feel there's a lot for her to do at home.
Well, of course, that's what I was, as they were all children, babies. I didn't use nursery schools or kindergarten or even the first grade. I taught them all to read at home and kept them home and loved having the small babies around.
You don't seem to have a clash of wills. There's not a lot of competitiveness in your home. No one feels threatened. Politically, can you understand those marriages where that is not the case?
Well, yes. You see, I'm not competing with Fred in his career. He's got a wonderful, successful legal career, and I don't compete with him in that. And I have my little projects over here, which he supports, and that may have something to do with it.
It doesn't infringe on your life at home. Do you ever see each other? Do you ever see each other?
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Of course, we've got 6 children. We have to see each other.
That's true.
I've mentioned it before. Phyllis was not completely against the idea of women having an education or a career. She had those things as well. She really needed women to have the correct opinion that she held. They can have it all in life, but their ultimate fulfillment will come from being a wife and mother.
Mrs. Schlafly, I can't, it seems to me that at least you ought to grant that we have, by the manner in which we raise young girls in this culture, narrowly defined the possibilities for them in this world, and that we've effectively told them as they grow up that their only fulfillment is through a man, and that they are more likely to perceive themselves as nurses rather than doctors, as housewives rather than people who could contribute perhaps to the arts or to science. Don't you agree?
No, I don't agree at all. I think we correctly tell them that the main fulfillment for most women is in the home. Now, I think all of these careers are open to women, but you're telling our young women a very false thing if you teach them that, that anything else is preferable to being in the home.
It's so frustrating when Phyllis boils down women's liberation to should women work outside the home or not, because it's completely irrelevant. Women have always worked and they always will. It's really frustrating to see the way that she treats aggression and feminism in such a flippant way.
And I think that's so unfortunate. To have women wake up in the morning, believe they're never going to get a fair deal. If you get a job, you won't be paid what you ought to be paid. If you get married, your husband will probably beat you up. It's extremely unfortunate. And I think, I mean, if they picked the wrong man, that was their mistake. It's not society's problem. They try to make all of their personal problems society's problem. And I don't think it is. I think they have had personal problems.
Sorry, my outfit keeps changing because I have been thinking about this topic for days, and each day I come in and edit, and I think of more shit that I want to say. Currently in America, we have a black woman, Adriana Smith, who is being kept on life support so that she can be used as a incubator in a pro-life state. Women are being abducted and abused and murdered left and right. Companies like Hobby Lobby are allowed to discriminate against their own employees and not allowing them to have their birth control covered by insurance. Mothers are being abducted by ICE. Women are being jailed for having miscarriages. Women in America who are incarcerated are constantly dehumanized and forced to do free labor or labor where they're only paid pennies. Social services are being slashed so women can't feed themselves or their children. Trans women are constantly being murdered. There are thousands of rape kits that have still not been tested, and abusers often face little to no consequences. People who are born with uteruses often get denied medical procedures because the doctor's office doesn't think that they should be allowed to get those procedures. LGBTQ plus rights are being eradicated every day, and our president is a rapist. There is a lot of shit still left to fight for. And anytime this kind of stuff was brought up to Phyllis, she would just victim blame. She would say, well, the problem is feminists don't pick good husbands. Is that the problem? And is that going to solve anything, Phyllis?
Well, I've had a very supportive husband. And the women who are successful mostly have had that advantage. I can't help it if the feminists don't know how to pick good husbands. But you look, Margaret Thatcher had a very supportive husband, and she got a great career. You don't hear the feminists bragging about really successful women. They are not for women's success because they don't believe women can be successful. They think women are ground down by the patriarchy.
Honestly, as much as she claimed to be an advocate for housewives, she also talked just as much shit on them, because I have a clip here where she's saying all she ever wanted when she was a housewife was a washing machine, and so now housewives have all these conveniences, and so she doesn't even know what they're complaining about.
But the amount of time it takes to keep the house today is so small in comparison with what it used to be. For example, when I got married, all I wanted in this world was a dryer so that I didn't have to hang up my diapers. Now they have paper diapers. And there are just so many labor-saving conveniences. You can even buy your onions already chopped in the grocery store. I don't know what these housewives have to complain about.
In that same interview, she says that the government is encouraging women to have babies out of wedlock because I don't know for what reason why she would think that, other than thinly veiled racism and or bitching about social assistance.
Well, I don't think that's moving in the right direction. We had an economy where husbands and fathers supported their family. Now, our government is encouraging girls to have babies without husbands. That means that the taxpayers have to pay for it. And I think that's completely wrong and counterproductive. And no, I don't think we should restructure the job pattern to accommodate that.
Phyllis was incredibly privileged. Not only was she wealthy, she had a 6-bedroom mansion and a full-time housekeeper, but she did all of this work and labor for the Republican Party, and she was never paid for it.
But weren't you, in essence, a working woman all of your life?
Of course I was working, but I wasn't employed outside the home. A mother who has 6 children works very hard indeed. I was always a full-time homemaker for 25 years. I think that a woman can indeed have it all, as I have had, if she realizes that she can't have it all at the same time.
In 1952, Schlafly ran for Congress as a Republican in the majority Democratic 24th Congressional District of Illinois. She won the Republican primary election over John T.R. Godlewski by 18,793 to 11,943. That's 61.14% and 38.86%. However, she lost the general election to incumbent Democrat Charles Melvin Price, winning 63,000 votes to Price's 117,000 votes.
Also, I found this on the Phyllis Schlafly archive. Apparently this is a newspaper clipping. It says, the morning after her surprising win in the 1952 Republican primary. Remember, that was just the primary. She did not win the general election. Phyllis enjoyed cooking breakfast for the family. She doesn't let political successes interfere with her wifely duties, reported the St. Louis Globe Democrat. Well, good for you, Phyllis. I will say I am jealous of her awesome 50s stove, because you know that bad boy probably still runs.
And in 1970, she ran unsuccessfully for Illinois' 23rd Congressional District, losing to Democratic incumbent George E. Shipley by 91,000 votes to 77,000 votes. And she never sought public office again, although I would argue she might as well have been the fucking president the whole time. Because she won her primary in the 50s, she was allowed to participate at the Republican National Convention. And she would attend each subsequent RNC until her death.
More on that when we discuss the 60s.
Also in 1958, she founded the Cardinal Menzies Foundation, which focused on teaching Catholics about the danger of communism. They weren't part of Representative McCarthy's anti-communism crusade, however. No, she just did it because she hated communists so much. And if you check out the website, MINDSZENTY.org, you can see the latest Menzies reports, okay? So here's what they want you to be worried about. Declining birth rates should worry us all. An exploration of long-term trends in birth rates around the world, their causes, and the need to restore a pro-natal culture. The deep state is deeper than we thought. It's not just a few former intelligence officials, but a far-reaching network of U.S. bureaucrats acting in concert with federal contractors and NGOs. Non-government organization. American optimism and historical parallels. Presidents Reagan and Trump each found success with an optimistic vision for the U.S. It looks like morning again in America. Apparently, Eleanor Schlafly is the co-founder and former president. Who the fuck is Eleanor Schlafly?
Also, your mom and dad started the Cardinal Menzies Foundation, which was critical in advancing pro-liberty, pro-faith message at a time when communism's embrace was being felt pretty heartily in certain sectors of American society. Where do you think your mother's drive came from to motivate women and men across the country in these causes?
Well, my mother's drive came because she wanted the country to be a better country for her children and her grandchildren. That was ultimately her drive. But I'm so glad, Raymond, that you brought up the Cardinal Menzies Foundation, because in the first episode, the person who gets treated the worst is my Aunt Eleanor Schlafly, who co-founded Cardinal Minzetti Foundation with my parents. And if for anyone who knew Aunt Eleanor, she was a force to reckon with. She was vivacious, witty, charming, and they have painted her as a sad sack wallflower, which is so unfortunate because as I always say, you know, when Phyllis and Eleanor were in a room together, Eleanor was the one who dominated, if you ever knew her.
Cardinal Minzetti Foundation is a worldwide nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization. I would say it's very partisan, which offers reliable information on the nature, propaganda, and goals of atheistic communism and socialist ideologies. Founded in 1958 by Eleanor, Fred and Phyllis Schlafly, together with Reverend Stephen Dunker, C.M., a missionary expelled from China by the communists. The foundation also covers secular attacks on faith and family values, supports the rule of law and constitutional government, upholds the authentic teaching of the Catholic Church, and exposes persecutions and abuses of human rights around the globe. The foundation's name honors Venerable Joseph Cardinal Minzetti of Hungary, a saintly hero who refused to compromise with the evils of communism and endured 23 years of imprisonment and isolation. His letter blessing the work of our organization is found here. Pope Pius XI's famous encyclical Divini Redemptoris remains the official teaching of the Catholic Church on communism, and it remains the Foundation's valuable guide for education, action, and prayer. Wow, I wonder how she would feel about the last couple popes we had. In 1958, she joined the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society, in essence, was an early prototype of the modern far-right lobbyist think tank we see dominating political discourse in the modern U.S. Founded in 1958, the John Birch Society was primarily founded as an anti-communist organization. Robert Welch Jr. believed that fundamentalist Christians would be central to the American anti-communist resistance, believing that their focus on individualized salvation would help to stave off collectivist ideology. Moving into the 1970s, the organization would come to reflect what we might call a more modern Republican worldview: lower taxes, reduced government regulation on businesses, and an opposition to both comprehensive sex education and abortion. In turn, the organization would come to form the bedrock for the kind of culture war approach taken by groups like the Heritage Foundation, the Moral Majority, Turning Point USA, and laying the groundwork for the us versus them mentality espoused by so many within the modern MAGA movement. Here is a short clip of a John Birch Society film that I found on C-SPAN, and they're painting the fight for civil rights of the 1960s as anarcho-communism.
Anarchy, the breakdown of law and order, a chaotic reign of terror, mob rule and rioting, the collapse of government authority. These phrases ring strange in the ears of Americans, and for good reason. Through the years, America has stood as the world symbol for law and order. Our government is responsive to the will of the people. Our courts and legislatures provide the mechanics for a peaceful redress of grievances. And the policeman on the corner has traditionally been looked upon as a friend, not as the instrument of a tyrant. Anarchy, well, that was something we read about in our newspapers that was always happening in other countries. Perhaps the people in other countries had just reasons to riot against their governments. After all, many of the nations of the world are dictatorships in one form or another. What business was it of ours, anyway? Newsworthy, perhaps, but it could never happen here. Then, in the summer of 1964, widespread rioting and looting suddenly broke out in Harlem, in Rochester, in Newark, in Jersey City, in Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Chicago, all within a few days of each other. It was as though an unseen hand had given the signal. The degree of communist influence in these riots has been subject of much discussion and controversy. For a solution to this controversy, let's review the events of recent years, both at home and abroad, in light of the communists' own plans for world conquest. Divide the people. Split them into quarreling factions, fighting among themselves rather than their common enemy. This is the comrade's first rule for the conquest of any country. For well do they know from long experience that the nation so divided and weakened can be easily conquered from within.
She joins the John Birch Society, although she denied forever, basically, that she was ever a part of this group because they're so controversial. We know now that they published and bought millions of copies of her first book to help popularize it and get it on best-selling lists. And not only that, recently, a letter that she wrote to the John Birch Society, and it's on Phyllis Schlafly letterhead. There's nothing more damning than that. This is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. In 1959, Birch Society founder Robert Welch.
Robert Welch actually got his start in the candy business. He bought the recipe for and produced the caramel candy Sugar Daddies.
Robert Welch toured the United States attempting to recruit patriotic Americans at a series of meetings, including one in Chicago attended by Schlafly and her husband, historical documents reveal. The John Birch Society is doing a wonderful work, and my husband and I both joined promptly after the Chicago meeting. Phyllis Schlafly wrote on December 5th, 1959, in a letter to Vern P. Kaub, a Wisconsin journalist and political activist who became a member of the Willis Carto's Liberty Lobby, a conservative anti-communist group known for its advocacy of both white supremacy and anti-Semitism. In the same letter, Schlafly thanks Cobb for information about McGuffey's Readers, a set of primary grade textbooks viewed as anti-Semitic by critics. Her letter, part of the Cobb collection at the Wisconsin Historical Society, was discovered by freelance researcher Ernie Lazar, who has spent the last 35 years researching extreme right groups and individuals. He recently turned his vast collection, including FBI documents and various historical documents, over to the Internet Archive. Schlafly's involvement with the John Birch Society is further documented in the organization's February 29, 1960 issue of the John Birch Society Bulletin. The publication reprinted a Schlafly letter initially published in the National Review, with John Birch Society founder Welch calling Phyllis Schlafly a very loyal member of the John Birch Society. When the U.S. Supreme Court banned state-sponsored prayer in public schools in 1962, Schlafly mobilized a grassroots following, primarily composed of Christian women that opposed feminism, modern liberalism, and cultural changes in Western society. She argued that the Equal Rights Amendment would take away a woman's right to raise her own children in their home. And we'll definitely get into that later, but that was her whole basis for her anti-ERA campaign, was that women supposedly had all these rights and protections already, and if we equalized the sexes with this constitutional amendment, the ERA, that those protections would be removed and that all these horrible things would happen. In response, Schlafly founded a volunteer organization called Stop ERA, which stood for Stop Taking Our Privileges, which is a horrible acronym. Just stop ERA gets the point across. You don't have to add extra words to it. We get it, 3 years later, Stop ERA became the Eagle Forum, an Illinois-based organization that went on to espouse assorted conspiracy theories, including that same-sex marriage advocates are trying to destroy Christianity, and that there is a secret plan to unite Canada, Mexico, and the United States into the North American Union. Schlafly demanded that the release of what she believed were secret U.S. documents about the North American Union. When that went nowhere, she called for a congressional investigation, but that also tanked. But the Eagle Forum and Schlafly didn't stop there. Her group was among the first on the anti-immigrant, fear-mongering bandwagon, preaching that if the flow of immigrants into the United States wasn't controlled, Islamic Sharia law would replace the nation's form of constitutional law. In 2005, the Eagle Forum became part of the Secure Borders Coalition, an alliance of Christian right groups, including Accuracy in Media, the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, and the Minutemen Civil Defense Corps. The coalition issued a statement attacking all amnesty and guest worker proposals for immigrants and vowed to oppose any political candidate backing those concepts. We talked about the ERA briefly in that article, but before that, her real passion was national defense and foreign policy. She would frequently give interviews and she would write books about this, and she would frequently speak about how we need more nukes to protect us from Russia and the nuclear weapons that they have, and how we don't have enough and we don't spend enough money on it, and how it used to be this great country and now we're opening ourselves up to being bombed. But we need to also bomb other people, and it was strange. So here is a little bit of an interview that she gave in the 60s about this topic.
In World War II, our country was able to beat two of the great military powers of the world, Germany and Japan, fighting on two fronts. And today, here we are engaged in a little war in Vietnam, fighting not a second-rate power, not a third-rate power, but a 30th-rate power. One half of a poor little underdeveloped, unindustrialized country. The war goes on, month after month. We put more and more men in. We increase our numbers every month. And the best that Secretary McNamara can say is that we are no longer losing. How did it happen that we are in this position? And why is it that we can't bring the war to a speedy conclusion and save the lives of all those Americans?
So I just want everybody to be clear about what Phyllis is advocating for here, because she's a master propagandist, and we need to know that she understands that even in her time, this would sound completely nutter butters and completely unethical and completely disgusting. Which is why she would probably say, oh, I wasn't necessarily talking about utilizing America's strongest, most devastating, and most unstable weaponry against a developing nation, but that's what she's saying. She is saying that she wants to utilize nuclear arms against the country of Vietnam to end the war quickly, and the only reason she would say that is because she clearly has no value for human life beyond the lives of white American soldiers in this situation. She has no regard for the Vietnamese. I would argue that she probably sees them as less than people, but maybe that's just me. But she will say, oh, I meant blockades. Oh, I meant bombing strategic targets. She did not bring up Germany and Japan, knowing that history, for any other reason than to evoke nuclear weapons. She wants us to end that war quickly because we're big and strong and we can kill everyone in that country in one pass. And she doesn't understand why we don't do that because she is a monster.
Well, everyone says that we can win the war readily in Vietnam. Why aren't we doing so?
Well, that's right. The Secretary or the head of our Air Force, General McConnell, said that the war in Vietnam could be won overnight. And when asked what he meant by overnight, he said in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. The head of our Navy in the Pacific said that the 7th Fleet could win in a day or two if given the right orders. And everybody knows that the big percentage of the weapons and supplies that are killing American boys come in from the Soviets by water and through the port of Haiphong. Everybody says that if we would just blockade the harbor, mine the harbor, knock out the dredges there, bomb the so-called expensive targets in North Vietnam, we could bring the war to a speedy conclusion. And we could save all this blood, sweat, and tears.
In that same vein, the Democrats that year put out a very famous campaign ad, and it's famous because there wasn't a lot of negative campaign ads like we have now. And this was on behalf of LBJ and the 64 election, and this ad was called Daisy. And it's basically warning the American people that if you vote for the other guy, you're voting for nuclear war.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
In 1964, she campaigned for Barry Goldwater.
Barry Goldwater's reputation preceded him at this point. He was already known as an extremist and a racist, and oh my God, there's a fucking wasp in here.
A vote for Lyndon Johnson is a vote for war from weakness. A vote for Barry Goldwater is a vote for peace through strength. This is the choice we must make for ourselves and for our children on November the 3rd.
Where is it?
Okay, it's right here under the pickle jar.
Oh, fuck.
Could you just take the tray?
Honestly, yeah.
Just take the whole tray.
Just taking the tray.
Show him.
Yeah. There he is. You can see him.
We're not going to kill him, but he's being sent out of here.
Back out into the yard so he can find his way in a few hours, I'm sure.
Anyway, Barry Goldwater was kind of like Trump, where he was seen as anti-establishment, and Phyllis was really into this idea that there was a Republican elite and they were kingmakers and like they were going to do things their way, and the main Republican guy that everybody thought was going to win the primary was Nelson Rockefeller, that Rockefeller. And so anyway, she campaigned for Goldwater and actually organized a group at the RNC called the Moral Conservatives, which I have a very strong feeling that Jerry Falwell copied off of her. And I'm not saying she got everybody riled up, because his delegates were very boisterous, and at the RNC they were like getting so hype that they were shaking the media tower and stuff, and so just wild.
Goldwater is far to the right of the mainstream of the Republican Party. He votes against the Civil Rights Act. He really seems like he's very reckless when it comes to nuclear war. The Goldwater campaign is absolutely convinced that unless they basically run this convention with military discipline, the Eastern establishment will steal the Republican Party from the conservative base.
If there is a victory, it's not a victory for Barry Goldwater. It's a victory for the mainstream of Republican thinking.
Now the liberal side, who are horrified that the public is going to see the Republicans as captive of extremists, decide that they're going to put forward 3 platform planks. One promising to uphold the civil rights law, another to denounce extremism, whether it comes from the Ku Klux Klan or the Communist Party, and another denouncing racism. They give these very soaring speeches, and the Goldwater delegates just consider this an insult.
So when the famous Rockefeller speech occurs, the galleries erupted.
The Republican Party is in real danger of subversion by a radical, well-financed, highly disciplined majority. Here we have order. Here we have order so that the justice can be heard.
It was great drama. Here is the governor of the state of New York, who had just been a serious candidate for president, a millionaire, billionaire, being booed by his party.
Rockefeller wants this to happen. He wants the extremism of the Goldwater forces to be revealed for all to see. At a certain point, things are so violent, the passions against the media are so great, they literally start grabbing the spindles that are holding these glass booths for the networks and shaking them.
Barry Goldwater.
It's the job of the nominee traditionally to give this unifying speech, to kind of usher all the rancor under the bridge. But Barry Goldwater is so sick of these snooty, arrogant Eastern elites telling him what to do and treating his delegates like they're, children, that he decides, the hell with it. That's the context for the most famous line of the convention.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
The impact of the convention in 1964 was the moderates in the Republican Party were right. Barry Goldwater was seen as a dangerous extremist.
The convention pretty much killed us. I mean, I had a sinking feeling that it was pretty much over. It was mitigated by the roar of the crowds, but that's very misleading. We lost by 15 million votes in the actual election. But I'd say because of Goldwater's breaking the ice, so to speak. The conservative movement became very important within the Republican Party.
Phyllis wrote a book called A Choice, Not an Echo, which was in favor of Barry Goldwater and all the other political opinions that she had, and was honestly incredibly important to the political landscape. And you could still see ripples of it today, not only with Trump's second term, but Nikki Haley, another Republican woman politician, actually made a campaign ad for the 2024 election, and it was called A Choice, Not an Echo. And I bet you're thinking, I wonder if Phyllis would have liked her. And I'm not sure, because she was okay with women politicians as long as they weren't Democrats, but Phyllis loved Trump. And Eagle Forum split up, and her children have been fighting for years over her endorsement of Trump. And she called Geraldine Ferraro a affirmative action hire. So who knows what her opinion would have been. I think she just wanted to be contrarian. Allegedly, after all of the stuff that Phyllis did in the 60s for the Republican Party, her husband Fred encouraged her to get back into the game and start campaigning against the ERA. The ERA, or the Equal Rights Amendment, was supposed to be a constitutional amendment that would prevent discrimination based on sex. And it was first introduced in 1923. It gained traction in the 70s, and constitutional amendments need to be ratified by at least 38 out of the 50 states. And by the time Phyllis got to it, it had been ratified by 30 states. So we were almost there. Spoiler alert, it did not pass because it ran out of time. Like, there was a certain time frame that it could be ratified. And even though the proponents of the ERA had sued to get more time, and they kept trying to get more time, it ran out. And by the time it ran out, it was the 80s, and Ronald Reagan was the president, and he sure as shit was not going to support that. So it died, although there has been moves recently to try and get it ratified again. Not getting my hopes up. The only text of the proposed ERA is as follows. It is very simple, and it does not go into a lot of detail. That's important to remember, because Phyllis would just outright lie about the things that it supposedly said it was going to do. She scared a lot of women into being anti-ERA because she would tell them all these outlandish things that she supposedly thought was going to happen because of this, okay? This is all that it says, all right? Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on an account of sex. Section 2. The Congress shall have the power to enforce, by appropriate legislation, the provisions of this article. Section 3. This amendment shall take effect 2 years after the date of ratification. That's all. Sounds great. Civil rights legislation was passed. Voter rights legislation had been passed. Why not an ERA? Well, Phyllis decided on her own, and she was a law scholar, so she was able to interpret things, and she felt that certain things were going to happen because of this. Phyllis was telling people that because of this, the alleged protections that women and housewives already had would be repealed. She said that men would no longer have to financially provide for their wives.
On the other hand, when we looked into this amendment, we found that it will have many unfortunate consequences that we didn't realize in the beginning. For example, the laws of every one of our 50 states require the husband to support his wife and family. And a lot of wives don't realize this, and for those who don't, I suggest that they ask their lawyer to get them one of the most comprehensive reference works on American law, which is called American Jurisprudence Second, Volume 41. And it spells out all these wonderful rights that the wife has to be supported by her husband and to be provided with a home by her husband, things that are very precious to women. Well, now the Equal Rights Amendment will come along and invalidate all these state laws, because no longer can you have any law which imposes an obligation on one sex that it doesn't on the other.
That women would be now eligible for the draft, and that they would have to go fight and die in the Vietnam War.
Just look at the Vietnam War. Did you hear any women rushing over to their draft board saying, I want my equal rights to be treated just like men? Did you hear any mothers rushing down to the draft board saying, I love my daughters as much as my sons, you must take the daughters too? Absolutely not.
No. But we heard a lot of women who went down to the draft boards and said, I love my son, we don't need this war.
Yes, but that doesn't stop war, does it?
Then
we do have wars.
We do have wars, and that's because most of the countries are led by men, not by women.
Oh, no, just look, we might get an Indira Gandhi and start a war.
Yes, we might very well. But I think that our efforts need to go towards stopping war, not stopping equality for women.
Women would be forced to go into the workplace.
Well, it would take away the preferential rights of wives and homemakers, because the laws of every one of the 50 states said that the husband had the obligation to financially support his wife and children and provide them with a home. And again, those are sex discriminatory laws based on the obvious fact that women have babies and men don't have babies.
And Phyllis would say all the time, oh, I don't have a problem with women who work. You know, I just don't want men to not lose their jobs because it's being awarded to a woman instead. Because what she actually wanted was a society where the women stay home and the men work, because she preferred it that way. She believed that that is a woman's calling. And I know it's contradictory. She was a contradictory person. She wanted to have the benefit of the doubt by saying, oh, no, I love it when women work. But at the same time, she didn't want a society where that was the case.
Beyond that, it is an attack on the economic integrity of the family. What it does is promote a society where you have more and more two-income families and more no-income families. As the husband and father who's out of a job and looking for a job can't get it because the preference has been given to the woman in the matter of awarding the jobs. Now, there are today 40 million wives who are being supported by their husbands. Do we want to induce any significant percentage of these 40 million wives to leave their homes and go into the job market? Several million of them have done that in the last few years, and we have the highest unemployment that we've had in many, many years. Do we want to induce the rest of them to go out of the homes? Do we want to tell all those husbands, maybe you've been supporting your wife up to now, but that's not your obligation anymore? I'll tell you what I think will happen if that Equal Rights Amendment goes through and the husbands and the wives find out that they have no more legal rights to be supported in the home. I think they will voluntarily go into the job market. I think they will go in by the millions in order to build up some job seniority. Is this what we want to induce as a matter of social policy? I don't think it is.
And when a reporter brought this up to her in the 80s, you know, years after the original anti-ERA campaign, the reporter says, well, you know, women have to work, point blank. Like, it doesn't really matter what your opinion is. And Phyllis spouts off with some shit about, well, you know, millions of people live below the poverty line and they're fine. I don't really think that these women have to work. They just want to live lavishly. And we shouldn't encourage a society like that.
But when you look at these so-called women who have to work, many of the women who are saying that are women who are wives who simply want a standard of living higher than their husband is producing. These are choices people make. I've made a point of looking into the income levels of many of these women who say they, quote, have to work, close quote, who are interviewed in the newspapers and on television. And you will find generally they are they have the two incomes at the $50,000 to $60,000 income level. And they have made the choice that they prefer to live at that level rather than get along on the husband's income.
But isn't that the American dream? I mean, we grow up thinking that we're supposed to provide and have all these luxuries and all these other things. It's going to take two people to do it. And if you have an educated woman along with an educated man who can do it, what's wrong with that?
The American dream is not hiring strangers to take care of your children. That is not the American dream. The American dream is a mother sacrificing her own career advancement in order to give her children the best care that she possibly can.
I still argue the point, though, that there are a lot of women out there who have to work. And I don't buy what you're saying, that because they want more for themselves. There are women who are just staying above the poverty level.
The median family income in this country for all families is $26,000 a year.
And that doesn't go very far.
Well,
where does $26,000 a year
but
go?
there are millions of people living at this level. This is the median income level. So if you have a two-earner family, you are living well above the average in this country.
And you want to educate your children on $26,000 a year, median income. So in other words, keep everybody at the bottom.
Oh, no. The American dream is to have prosperity with more jobs. But children haven't heard the call of women's liberation. They're just the same as they ever were. Mm-hmm. And they need the mother to look after them.
Mm-hmm. And she would just talk down on women and say that, we'll never be as good as men, especially in areas like sports. She even talks about how there will never be a woman tennis player who's as good as a man, which, made me laugh a little bit.
You need only look at the Olympic Games. Here you have young women who have trained for professional competition from the time they could walk. And yet still the gulf of difference between what women can do and what men can do is so great that the women not only can't win any medals in competition with the men, they can't even qualify. Now, there are a few sports like figure skating where grace and beauty is part of the game. The women do very well. But in your competitions of strength and short-term endurance, there's just a tremendous gulf of difference between men and women. Take even such non-contact, non-strenuous sports as tennis and golf. If you take the ladies' tees off the golf courses, the women are out of the game. Take tennis. There is no way that the top women professional tennis players can possibly compete with the top male tennis players. A marvelous tennis player, Chris Evert, is only about as good as the 20th top male tennis player. There is that difference, and you simply are dooming yourself to a life of frustration and unhappiness if you fail to recognize these differences and then go ahead and start tackling life's problems.
One of the other random things that she said the ERA would do would be if two parents got divorced, they would have to split the kids equally. And not in custody, but like one parent would get one kid each.
For our system, in case of the breakup of marriage, the mother gets her children in most cases. Now, who wants to trade that in for a so-called equality, whereby each parent gets one child?
Well, I don't think the Equal Rights Amendment says that either,
yes.
that in case of a divorce, each parent gets one child.
It says that you've got to interpret things absolutely equally.
Churches would have to perform gay marriages, that lesbians were going to have privileges over straight people. I wish.
And the bottom line of what they're for is ERA, government-funded abortion, federal child care, universally available, lesbian privileges to enable them to teach in the schools and adopt children, and reverse discrimination to get women in the jobs. Now, in addition to that, there's a variety of other goals which varied from state to state, such as they want to eliminate veterans' preference, they want to take the money out of national defense and put it in women's lib. In our state, they passed a resolution specifically to take the money out of the B1 and put it into a women's lib, taxpayer-financed advocate at every level of government so she can make sure the women are getting their jobs instead of the men.
And that the taxpayers would have to fund federal daycare centers.
That the equality rationale requires us to establish taxpayer-financed child care centers. This is to relieve women of what they see as this unfair burden of being expected to look after their babies.
That there would be abortion on demand paid for by taxpayers. Phyllis really said, Hyde Amendment, never heard of her. That
society would have to go gender neutral, especially in the schools, that there would be unisex bathrooms that we would all get preyed on.
The four-letter word that the women's liberation movement wants to get rid of is lady. And in the sexism guidelines, it says that this is a word which must be eliminated because it connotes ladylike behavior. Now, I think all this is really rather pathetic, but these are the orders going out to those who write textbooks.
Wasn't Phyllis the one praising the McGuffey readers from the John Birch Society? You know, the racist textbooks?
So they have convinced some of the major textbook publishers, such as Macmillan and McGraw-Hill, to issue new orders to textbook authors, eliminating what they call sexist words and sexist stereotyping in the textbooks. The examples I have are taken specifically from the Macmillan guidelines on the elimination of sexism in textbook. They, for example, say you can no longer say chairman or salesman. It must be chairperson and salesperson. You cannot any longer say mankind. It must be humanity. You can't use the word brotherhood. It must be amity. You can't talk about manpower, it must be human energy. You can't talk about forefathers, it must be precursors. I remember one of the early debates I did on the Equal Rights Amendment, and I referred to the Founding Fathers, and she spun around and said, "You see, you didn't say the Founding Mothers."
I just know that if she was still around today, she would have been anti-cancel culture, and she would have been calling everything woke.
I think mixing them up as to whether they're boys or girls is just as hurtful to them. And we talk about the younger generation searching for their identity. If they don't even know whether they're boys or girls, they really are going to have a hard time searching for their identity.
Gee, doesn't that sound incredibly familiar to the type of culture war and transphobic rhetoric that we see literally today?
There are some who would suggest that that the feminist message is misunderstood. That feminists are not meaning to say that raising children is a demeaning thing to do. Feminists, in fact, perceive the raising of children as near sacred, and also...
No, they don't. You just listen to their language. They demean it. What they really want is to have the men in the home as house husbands doing the dishes and the diapers. That is really what they want, because they look upon that as menial type of drudgery. Now, I think it doesn't make any difference what career you go into. It's all full of drudgery. I write books and write newsletters, and there is no drudgery worse than writing. It takes enormous self-discipline to sit there late at night over that typewriter and to polish and refine. It's just as much drudgery as doing dishes and diapers. But to your average woman, when you've spent these years doing dishes and diapers, you've got a living, breathing, loving, good citizen to show for your efforts. Mm-hmm. And most women would rather cuddle a baby than a typewriter or an office machine or a factory.
And she would give speeches and she would organize protests and things. And one of the things that she did to like win over the Congress people and to kind of set herself apart and be like, see, our group is real women. We are feminine, we are respectful, and we really care. And so she and her group would bake fresh bread and bring it to the Congress people to win them over.
Well, you realize that this is pre-internet, pre-fax machine, all pre-email, all that sort of thing. They said Phyllis would send out her rotunda letter. Meet me in the rotunda at 12 o'clock on Wednesday and so forth. And that's what I did, and we would get there, and then we would lobby the legislators. And once a year we would have our bread day, and we would take them home-baked bread and give one to every one, whether they were for us or against us. And the feminists called that our dirty trick. But at any rate, it was a good move. It was pretty cute. The legislators were glad to get our bread.
And by the way, Phyllis's daughter, Anne, the one who is kind of at war with the brothers right now. She now sells a cookbook that has the bread recipe in it on the Eagle Forum website.
And we were nice to them. We sent them valentines. We sent them nice notes. Meanwhile, the feminists were really pretty ugly, even to their own friends. And even the people who were sponsoring their amendment, they really weren't nice to them. And remember, toward the end, they went to the slaughterhouse and they got these plastic vials of bags of pig's blood and came back, and then they wrote on our marble floors at the Capitol the names of the people they hated the most.
I looked into that story, and it is true. A bunch of pro-ERA women's libbers got together to protest, and that is what they did. They told a slaughterhouse that they were going to use the blood for a play, which I would argue they were kind of doing theater. And so, yeah, that is true. White conservative housewives were told that all these scary, horrible things were going to happen because of the ERA, and they liked Phyllis. She was smart, she was well-spoken, and she seemed really passionate about protecting women. And so they believed her. And so she started a group called Stop ERA. I've already told you that it stands for a really stupid acronym. And she would, on their behalf, give speeches and talk to Congress and do these things, but the most important thing that she did with the Stop ERA group was that she mobilized these housewives. She taught them how to debate. She taught them how to canvass. She taught them how to phone bank. She taught them how to protest. And she was incredibly successful. And now these women were super empowered, ironically, to stop the ERA because of Phyllis.
They want to give the homosexuals and the lesbians the same dignity as husbands and wives.
ERA has nothing to do with abortion, it has nothing to do with homosexuality, but they tie these emotional issues into it, and it scares people.
By 1977, Schlafly's anti-ERA campaign had aligned with evangelical, Catholic, and Mormon faith groups.
In politics, everything is about coalitions, and these groups are learning to work together. By 1977, there really is no daylight between issues like the ERA, gay rights, and abortion. And the reason Phyllis Schlafly is such an important figure in this is she's able to encompass all these threads and bring them together.
There was this group that was like a satirical protest of Phyllis that was at this event, and they were called, Ladies Against Women. And there's this really funny interview that this reporter does with these women, and it's like shockingly modern, the things that they're saying, and even just how they dress and like their humor. It's so of today.
Ma'am, may I ask your name?
My name is Mrs. Dick Righteous.
Mrs. Righteous, could you look into the camera and say hello to our viewers?
Hi.
Somebody has to become a drag queen and call themselves Mrs. Dick Righteous. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Could you tell us your name, please?
My name is Mrs.
And so these ladies, they were having a fun laugh about the situation, and they were trying to poke fun at Phyllis.
Now, you're here for a reason tonight. What is that reason?
Yes, I am here for a reason. I am here I and my fellow ladies are here tonight to nip womanhood in the bud.
Now, when you say nip womanhood in the bud, what do you mean, Mrs. Righteous?
Well, I mean that we are here. I have a statement. Do you mind if I read my statement? We are here to prevent the feminist blight of blue jeans, flat shoes, and female facial nudity. We expect to see an American dress code as the law of the land. We also support a new congressional group, HULA, the House Committee on Unladylike Activities.
Now, go ahead and continue, sorry.
That's the House Committee on Unladylike Activities. They'll be holding hearings soon.
Okay. Can you tell us, please, what unladylike activities are?
Well, female facial nudity, blue jeans, flat shoes, equality, this whole, anti-submission movement that's going on in the land.
Now, when you say anti-submission, what do you mean?
I mean, there's an anti-submission movement, and we can't have such a thing. We can't have two sexes being equal. There has to be one head of a family, because otherwise you have a two-headed monster.
That sounds very serious. What are you doing to combat that?
Well, we have a couple of things planned to combat that. To protest, to ensure the defeat of the Vermont ERA, we intend to conduct a statewide iron-in, where we will be ironing pot holders, aprons, carpets. And we know that misguided feminists support the dangerous idea of equality, but the ERA will turn the Vermont state constitution into pornography by adding the word sex.
Now, what's wrong with that word?
That is not a word that ladies use.
But they were also very serious, and one of them got to speak at this event and tried to call out Phyllis, and, you know, Phyllis is no fun.
Okay, I know that Mrs. Schlafly is against abortion, but I'm very concerned about birth control. Right on every street corner in America in the drugstores are little rubber concentration camps in which sperm die every day. And I'd like to know what Mrs. Schlafly wants to do about this.
It's a free country. You can do whatever you want. Now it is very clear now that the American people are demanding some type of protection for public health against the disease of AIDS. If you read the New York Times this week, you will see that current polls are saying that 77% of the people believe that homosexuals should be forbidden to give blood to blood banks, that 51% believe that sex should be barred between people who have AIDS, and that 51% are in favor of a quarantine for people who have AIDS. Now, the issue, I'm not taking a position on that, I'm just reporting, and if the New York Times said it, it must be so. But in any event, when these issues are raised, the homosexuals usually cry discrimination. Is ERA going to give them a constitutional protection for a disease and to prevent us from protecting the public safety?
In another Two Nickels moment on the channel, in 1977, Phyllis, like Anita Bryant, was also pied in the face. And since there is no footage of this amazing historical event, I leave you with a scene from FX's Mrs. America.
You're a traitor to your sex by waging war against women.
The incident went down at the Women's National Republican Club luncheon at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. Aaron K., the man who pied Phyllis, got in with a fake press pass under the pseudonym David Simon in reference to the nursery rhyme Simple Simon Met a Pieman. He wore a borrowed suit to slide into a sea of Republican slime. He nevertheless stuck out because, unlike his Mrs. America counterpart, because he had an unkempt mustache and collar-length hair unlike the clean-cut crowd, and he had a paparazzi photographer by his side. We all go into the grand ballroom. I played along with the dance, said Kay. We saw these two security dicks at the entrance of the ballroom. I had to wait for them to leave so I could do the pie and make a clean getaway. When Kay's friend Nancy Borman, then editor of the feminist newspaper The Majority Report, approached Schlafly, he pulled out the pie from his briefcase. He got the pie at a Greenwich Village bakery. I walked up to Phyllis and placed it on her face, Kay said. I said, "That's for the ERA, you bitch," and walked right out. Kay's photographer sold the shots to the Associated Press, which were published widely. It looked like something out of a Charlie Chaplin film, the sequential photos, Kay recalled. Though he didn't see Schlafly's response because he immediately bolted out the door, luncheon guests recalled her supposed retort, which Blanchett also delivers in the Mrs. America episode. "Thank goodness it wasn't a cherry pie, because it would have ruined my dress." Kay said he chose an apple pie because it's a classic American staple, but he does have one regret all those years later. "I wish it was a cherry, raspberry, or blueberry pie to add some color," he said. "I was being too nice with the apple pie." From the 1970s to the 90s, a man named Aaron Kay pied public figures whom he considered detestable, from right-wing journalists to CIA chiefs, anti-abortion protesters, and Andy Warhol. Kay was a part of the Youth International Party, aka the Yippies, a group of stoner anti-war activists that John Waters once described as smart-ass late 1960s fake revolutionaries who think riots are a good place to get lucky for sex. Aaron Kay is still alive, and this is what he looks like. I also found out that his parents were Holocaust survivors, so what an interesting person. In 1976, Phyllis endorsed Ronald Reagan because he also ran that year. He didn't win till 80. And she gives another 30-minute long endorsement. She says some of the most unhinged shit that I have ever heard.
What we have witnessed in the last few years is the taking of religious and moral training out of the schools and the putting of the federal bureaucrats and the federal judges in control in the schools. There is no way that they can run the schools as well as local citizens. The results are not only a decline in learning, a social disruption, a fantastic increase in immorality, in illegitimate pregnancies and venereal disease, but actual crime inside the public schools is the fastest growing part of our current breakdown in social order. The National Education Association reported that last year, on school grounds, students committed 100 murders, 9,000 rapes, 12,000 armed robberies, 204,000 aggravated assaults, 270,000 burglaries, and they vandalized more than $600 million of school property. A recent report by the Harvard Law School Center for Criminal Justice bluntly states that the 6 worst cities in our country have at least 2,700 gangs with teenage members to the tune of 81,000 who terrorize public schools, shake down the pupils, and force them to pay for passing through a doorway, for using the gym or other sports facilities, for using cafeterias, and even for protection against being assaulted. The solution to this problem is to put God and moral training back in the schools and to get the HEW bureaucrats and the federal judges out so our young people can be trained in obedience to the 10 Commandments as well as to the laws of our country. We are told that this can't be done under U.S. Supreme Court decisions and HEW guidelines. This is a cop-out. The United States Constitution provides 2 excellent remedies for wrong Supreme Court decisions: a constitutional amendment or a congressional removal of jurisdiction from the federal courts. Many of the problems existing in the schools could be cured simply by the president telling the HEW department to stop trying to run our local schools. Don't let anyone tell you that it is a violation of the Constitution to have God and prayer in the schools.
And since it's a Phyllis Schlafly speech, you know she's got to talk about military defense spending and intercontinental ballistic missiles.
The day that Henry Kissinger went into office, our country had 1,054 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles, the backbone of our defense. Today, 7 years later, our country still has just 1,054 intercontinental ballistic missiles. We haven't added a single one. But meanwhile, the Soviets have added 1,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles, many of them far more powerful than ours. And today, the Soviet Union has 1,618 of these ICBMs, which means they have 50% more than we have.
I mean, I hate Henry Kissinger too, but for very different reasons.
The political process has given Ronald Reagan the trial and the experience, and he has stood the test. I believe he can do the job our country needs, and that's why I'm asking you to join with me in voting for Ronald Reagan. No matter which party you belong to, I believe you can do more by voting for Reagan than anyone else.
The thing that I need to tell you about in the 80s that pertains to our story is that that's when the ratification process, the timeline ran out for the ERA. I forgot to mention that this was in 1982. And when that happened, Phyllis threw this big party celebration called Over the Rainbow because like they're past the storm, not because of gay people. Although there was a giant rainbow balloon arch there, which is very gay. Many people gave speeches at the Over the Rainbow celebration, and I'm going to talk about that because even Jerry Falwell showed up, and he was problematic as always. But I was skimming through and I found this guy who was wearing a party hat and trying to be funny. And apparently his name is John Lofton, and he is a big-time conservative who is most famous for appearing on different talk shows and things. But the most famous thing he ever did was debating Frank Zappa about his lyrical content during the battle for the Parents Music Resource Center, the PMRC, and their whole debacle with, censorship and Tipper Gore and all that shit. It's too much. I can't handle it.
I'd like to make something clear at the outset. I like women. Some of my best friends are women. My wife and daughter, for example. Not only did I want my brother to marry a woman, he did. Let's face it, some women are big enough to lift refrigerators, and some men aren't. I have the tape. The purpose of the ERA is not to say you have to let any woman who comes through the door lift a refrigerator, but if she has commensurate skills with a man who is drawing the same or usually a higher salary, then she has to be given a crack at it.
That was so funny I forgot to laugh. Anyway, here's Phyllis.
I think the ERAers were the victim of their own ideology. They believe they're not persons. They believe they're second-class citizens. They believe that women can't do anything in our society because they're oppressed. And so they went to men like President Carter, and they went to governors, and they went to movie stars, and they went to powerful people in the media to do for them what they could not do for themselves. But we, of course, knew we were persons, and we know we're first-class citizens, and we know we have all constitutional rights. So we went right out and did it, because we knew women can do anything they want to do.
Phyllis gives the rest of her speech. She says the same things that she says all the time, including a random side tangent about the Panama Canal. And no, we don't have time to get into that today. And she says that with her movement, with Eagle Forum, they're going to take back America. And then everybody gives her a standing ovation, and then they sing God Bless America. And no, I'm not making that up.
This is the great hope for America. So my cheerful word is that America does have public officials of strength of character all across this country. And I think they are the type of people who had that strength of character 206 years ago, who were willing to pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to make sure that our country is free and independent. We have enough of those people. It doesn't take everybody. Maybe we'll never get those people who answer the Harris polls, but we've got enough of them to do the job. We have them out there. They have stood the test. And we can build this into a mighty movement that can set America on the right path. We need your help in this effort. Then conquer we must. For our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. We have the people with the strength of character, and this battle we have waged has proved it. Thank you for being here.
There were other people who spoke at this event in 1982, including Jerry Falwell. But before he goes on to give his speech, there is this very jarring and strange situation where this musical group sings a song about the ERA, but it's not just that simple. Like, they say the whole human race should go down on its knees to help stop the ERA.
On a wonderful evening like this, when the moon is as big as a yellow balloon, even the sparrows are singing in tune. On a wonderful evening like this, on an evening like this, I could kiss everybody. I'm so full of love and goodwill. Let me say furthermore, I'd adore everybody to come and dine. The pleasure's mine, and we will pay the bill. Let me take this occasion to say that the whole human race should go down on its knees. Show God we're grateful for victories like these, for He's helped us to stop ERA on a wonderful day like today.
Phyllis Schlafly has done something that no one else has ever done in our 206 years of history. And we are 206 years old next Sunday, Bob. And that is, she has marshaled together the conservative women of America into a powerful political unit. The liberals have been organized for a long time, and the names of those various groups are known to all of us. But Phyllis has put together a powerful, a dynamic organization. And a few of the men, a few of us, have contributed here and there, but the women really deserve this victory. And I congratulate Phyllis and the ladies. More than that, I would like to add to what Senator Denton said, and Senator Helms, to the greatest living Americans. We are just really beginning to fight. And the organization that has come together here tonight, which really represents, this is just a microcosm of millions out there who are just as dedicated to the task as we are. The training, all the information that has been dispensed, all of the experience that you and I and millions like us now have is now needed as we reorganize and marshal together again to stop abortion in this country once and forever.
And it's dystopian as hell.
I think that this, Phyllis, is an indication of what the Christian family can do when it ever gets together to do it. And I say thanks be unto God for working through His children in stopping all the forces, the unbelievable, the incomprehensible forces on the other side, who without a question have not only been stopped, I was here for the first burial 3 years ago, but have been backed up a long, long way. And the fact that they're going to ride the dead horse back into the Congress in a couple of weeks ought to be exciting to us, that we might even have a third burial. But I just want to say tonight that it's a delight to learn what Christians can do when they join hands together. I finally have a verse of scripture I must leave with you. My family, Jerry Jr. is here. This is not Maisel.
Holy shit, that is Jerry Jr. I don't know how I didn't recognize his face. He's got a very distinctive look. Little does he know what his life's gonna have in store for him. Phyllis had quite the media tour after the defeat of the ERA, and she talked to a lot of people who you might be familiar with, including I hesitate to say young, but a younger Larry King.
My special guest tonight is Phyllis Schlafly. I guess if we had to point to one thing, Phyllis Schlafly changed America by changing the vote on ERA. It was as simple as that. Do you feel like a Donna Quixote?
Well, every movement has to have a leader. We had millions of people on our side, and all I did was bring it all together.
But it all focused on you. By that I mean no political leadership was behind you. Gerald Ford was in favor of the ERA. Richard Nixon was in favor of the ERA. George Bush was in favor of
Jimmy
the
Carter. Don't
Jimmy
forget
Carter,
him.
the president at the time. I mean,
well, it is
you
true.
had a lot of windmills.
We showed that individual American citizens who do not hold public office and who don't have a big bankroll behind them or own a newspaper can affect public policy. And I think that's very exciting. I think that's part of the self-government process that our founding fathers gave us in this free country.
Belief, left, right, center, that an individual spurring on a movement can change things.
Yes, I think it's a tremendous lesson, and this is why I don't understand these people who throw up their hands at the political process in this country. It is complicated, but it's available there, and it is freedom, and it sure is better than whatever any other country has.
Why did you decide to take it on, since I guess no rational person would be against people being treated equally?
Well, the reason that motivated me was my realization that it would require young women to be drafted and put in military combat.
That was the first thing.
Yes, that was first, and that's what an absolute sex-neutral constitutional rule would do. But as the years went on, we found that there were many other reasons, like more power to the federal courts, which most people don't want to do. And then as the years went along, we found that it did have an abortion connection. And this is now clear in the briefs filed by the American Civil Liberties Union that they want to use ERA to mandate tax-funded abortions. So that became an additional argument. And then you have the whole gay rights arguments. And then you have the argument about the effect it would have in wiping out veterans' preference, which is admitted by some of the advocates. And more recently, you have an argument about losing the tax exemption of private and religious schools. On the other side, if I had to say the real reason why the ERA is lost is that they don't have a product to sell. There's nothing good that they can point to.
How about the side that says, though, they lost but they won? We, in effect, have ERA in America. Okay, they're not drafted, but women are equal in America today.
Of course they're equal.
Every employment place is conscious of hiring women. There's strides toward equal pay for equal work, etc. So in a sense...
Well, we're all for that. And one of our main arguments was that ERA would do nothing to help that. We already have those federal laws.
So in the 80s, when Reagan was actually president, they were buddy-buddy, as you would expect, but it wasn't always like that. And I have a really interesting article that I found from the LA Times. Schlafly, who had supported Barry Goldwater's campaign for the presidency in 1964, initially backed Philip Crane for the Republican nomination in 1980 because she harbored doubts that Reagan was sufficiently conservative. Eventually, she rallied behind Reagan and evidently believed that her advocacy on his behalf entitled her to a plum appointment in his administration. On Election Day 1980, before the results of the election were in, Joseph Coors, the beer guy, apparently at the behest of Schlafly, sent a letter to the Reagan-Bush transition team. Coors, the beer tycoon who had bankrolled the Heritage Foundation, that Heritage Foundation, urged that Schlafly be placed in an important spot in the Reagan government. Schlafly had her eye on the cabinet post as Secretary of Education. Can you fucking imagine? Now we have Linda McMahon, so... I highly recommend that Phyllis Schlafly be considered for either the position of Secretary of Education or Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. J. Van Andel, co-founder of Amway, one of the most famous MLMs of all time, wrote to the head of the transition team. Schlafly continued her efforts into the early days of the Reagan administration, but to no effect. Undeterred, she organized yet another campaign several months later to have herself appointed to the Supreme Court seat vacated by the retiring Potter Stewart in 1981. Gee, it's so interesting that Phyllis wanted to be on the Supreme Court when she felt that women in politics was affirmative action.
As a woman, politics aside, if that's possible, were you at least proud that a woman is running for Vice President of the United States, that people can now say to their daughters, you can grow up to be president someday?
You're talking about Geraldine Ferraro.
It's the only one I know.
No, because she's an affirmative action choice. And I think, well, I mean, she was chosen because she was a woman. And
then you opposed Justice O'Connor, too.
I think a woman should be president when she does the same thing that a man does to be president, which is to go into the primaries and offer herself to the voters.
Weren't you at least proud that a woman is running? You're a woman. Aren't you proud? I'm Jewish. If a Jew were running for president, whether I support him or not, I'd at least say, gee, I'm proud. You know, Jew never ran for president. I know Catholics that voted against Kennedy were still proud that a Catholic was the standard bearer.
Okay, granted all that. I think your question is predicated on women being a voting bloc, like...
No, on a woman just being proud of another woman running for the highest office in the land. Just the fact that a woman is running for the second highest office in the land.
No, women don't react that way. I think women cannot be pandered to as a group. They don't react the same way. They don't vote for somebody because she's a woman.
Then what the fuck was Stop ERA if not pandering to a female voting bloc?
Now, I'm very happy that Jean Kirkpatrick is telling those communists and third worlders off in the UN. She's doing a super job, and I admire that. I think that's super. But I admire what she's doing, not because she's a woman, and I like that, but I think the fact that Geraldine Ferraro was an affirmative action choice means that a lot of the facts about her that are plaguing her today did not come out till after she was chosen.
Did you then oppose Justice O'Connor, who came from an appellate court in Arizona and was an obvious affirmative action choice for the Supreme Court?
Well, yes, she was that. Of course, that is the history of the way court justices are chosen. Most of them are chosen for political reasons.
And so are most vice presidents.
Reagan, however, who had promised to appoint the first woman to the high court, chose Sandra Day O'Connor instead. Can you imagine the universe where Phyllis Schlafly was on the fucking Supreme Court? Because I can. It almost happened. I have no way of knowing how serious the self-nomination campaigns were received by the Reagan White House, but I imagine that the endorsement of such deep-pocketed Republican donors as Coors and Van Andel caught someone's attention. You can only guess how Schlafly, a supporter of taxpayer funds for religious schools, who believed that evolution is indoctrination, who insisted that the true foundation of our constitutional republic is Christianity, and who believed that the movement combating climate change was a redoubt for communists, would have functioned as Secretary of Education. On defense, Schlafly once remarked that the atomic bomb is a marvelous gift that was given to our country by a wise God. As for the Supreme Court, it's safe to say that at least some of her decisions would have differed from those of O'Connor, certainly including the latter's compromise ruling on abortion. Schlafly, having failed in her previous crusades of self-promotion, mounted one last effort early in 1985 at the beginning of Reagan's second term. Once again, Coors interceded on her behalf. He sent a letter hailing Schlafly as a great American and suggesting that she be appointed chair of the Commission on the Bicentennial of the U.S. Constitution. Reagan administration, apparently concluding that Schlafly, an attorney, could do little damage on the largely ceremonial commission, appointed her as a member, not chair, in 1985. Bicentennial was the 200-year birthday of America. Also in the 80s, she spoke out against AIDS education, because what else did you expect from Phyllis? Calling them sodomy lessons. And that all reminds me of Phyllis's BFF, Jerry Falwell, and his group, The Moral Majority, who would routinely speak out against the evils of homosexuals, and they even had a Moral Majority report where they claimed that AIDS was the gay disease that was going to kill Americans. In 1984, Ronald Reagan paid back Eagle Forum for all their years of support by filming a nice video message of encouragement to the group.
Finally, I'm grateful to the members of Eagle Forum for your stalwart stand for the sanctity of human life and for the right of children to address their Creator even in public schools and buildings. Under the leadership of Phyllis Schlafly, Eagle Forum has set a high standard for volunteer participation in the political and legislative process and in communicating ideas through the media. You know that the future direction of our nation depends on which candidates we elect to office this November. And that's why it's so important to have organizations like Eagle Forum, whose members make such enormous individual efforts in finding and electing good candidates from the courthouse to the White House, and especially in the Senate and the Congress. God bless all of you for your dedication to God, family, and country.
In the 90s,
Phyllis actually came out with a phonics book called First Reader, and it also came with a workbook, and it was a book teaching kids how to read.
Okay, so in 1992, right before the election, Phyllis's son, John, was outed against his will by a magazine called Queer Week, QW for short. And this magazine originally had branched off from a group called ACT UP, AIDS Education and Advocacy Group. Do not believe it is okay to ever out somebody, even if it is like ironic that his mom was a bigot, and even though John Schlafly is a Republican and does not approve of like gay rights or gay marriage, I get why they did it. I don't condone that. I don't think it's right, but the cat is out of the bag. He's been out for 30 years now. Like, John could probably never openly be like codependent relationship with his mom. I really feel like he would be afraid that she's gonna disapprove even in her afterlife. So here is the article. It basically says that John had been seen at gay events and gay Republican events, which I could not find proof of because I would love to see that, but that's what it is. It is just interesting that John is going to advocate for like the erasure of his own rights, and that he's going to defend his mom, even though she was a horrible, evil bigot. You know, it's complicated, right? He's probably self-hating in that way.
One of your sons has said that he is a homosexual. In the past, you called homosexuals perverts. Has his coming out changed your attitude about homosexuality?
No, I think it's not right. But a lot of them are very fine people. My son is a very fine man, and he does work with me in Eagle Forum, does a wonderful job. He's both a lawyer and an accountant, and he is extremely valuable. And he does understand the importance of traditional marriage, which he's willing to speak up for. So, again, I let my children live their own lives.
This is from the Washington Post from 1992. I think there has been a hysterical overreaction in the gay community to the Republican platform, said John Schlafly, a 41-year-old attorney who lives and works with his mother in Alton, Illinois. We have had a band of screechy gay activists and Washington-based pressure groups who get all the attention. The truth is, family values people, of which my mother is a part, and are not out to bash gay people. He embraces his mother's views, including her opposition to same-sex marriages and to extending civil rights protections to gays and lesbians, which he said would be a burden to employers. He said these views are not anti-gay and are endorsed by the majority of Americans. The statements come at a time when the presidential candidates are expressing sharply different views on gay rights, and the subject of homosexuals has emerged as a wedge issue in the campaign. I feel sorry for him, said Avis Lavelle, a spokeswoman for the Clinton campaign. He must be an anguished young man to carry that secret in the midst of his intolerant mother. John Schlafly said that QW, a New York gay weekly magazine, outed him in a story 2 weeks ago in an attempt to embarrass his mother and brand her a hypocrite. He said he has never tried to hide the fact that he was gay, but since he is not a public figure, he considered it an invasion of privacy to publish his sexual orientation. Ensuing interview requests, he said, were just one more example that the national media has lost all pretense to fairness. The coverage of the Republican convention was unbelievably biased, and the Newsweek cover story, Gays Under Fire, was so slanted it was a joke. They're trying to use him to hit me, Phyllis Schlafly said. I am baffled by all this hypocrisy stuff. I don't see any contradiction in my behavior. I am the most tolerant person in the world. And anybody who's saying I'm anti-gay is hysterical and paranoid. John Schlafly declined to discuss his romantic life. He serves as his mother's financial advisor and counts the Eagle Forum among his clients. He characterized his relationship with his 5 siblings and parents as close and loving. My mother is not a monster. That word was just used to describe her in a gay publication, he said. My life points to the fact that family values people are not hostile to gays and lesbians. The media too often portrays them as bigots or buffoons. In fact, they're well-meaning people who are trying to create a better world. Particularly galling to gays was Vice President Quayle's references to homosexuality as a lifestyle choice, that it is, quote, wrong. Gay leaders do not see homosexuality as a matter of choice. John Schlafly said sexual orientation is a deeply rooted inclination. The inclination is not a choice, he said, but we all have a choice to make in what we do with the inclination. John Schlafly said he believes that existing state sodomy laws and anti-gay employment policies were archaic and should be repealed. John Schlafly's views on the Republicans are in marked contrast to those of Diane Mosbacher, the lesbian daughter of Bush campaign finance chairman Robert Mosbacher. She has spoken out against what she perceives as the party's demonization of homosexuals. "I couldn't see it more differently," said Mosbacher. "Poor guy, my heart goes out to him." Obviously, the issue of gay marriage has been brought up a lot, since the 90s at least, and it didn't officially become the law of every state until 2015. At the time, Phyllis had called in to Fox News, because of course she did, and the host of this program, Alan Combs, asked Phyllis, is gay marriage bad for America? And Phyllis talks about how she loves John, and the host says, "Well, what do you think about, gay marriage, and what do you think about your son getting married?" And she said she hasn't faced it yet, meaning she's like, I don't even want to think about it. And she didn't have to, because she died the next year.
Is it really bad for America that people who are gay have the same rights now as people who are straight, at least in terms of marriage?
No, I think what's bad for America is that the number of people who are married and raising children is declining, and we're a shrinking population. And it's pretty well documented that the married couple of a husband and wife married to each other is the best environment to raise children in. In fact, we spent all this money on education in the last 25 years. And they thought that the difference between the high achieving and the low achieving was poverty. But now more recent information shows the difference is whether or not they have a mother and father raising them.
Well, first of all, gays are not going to be reproducing whether they're married or not married. So in terms of population, it's not going to make a difference. You have a gay son. What if he came to you and said, "Mom, I'm getting married"?
Oh, well, I'm going to love my family no matter what they do. I don't know. I'm not. Fortunately, I haven't faced that.
Well, you'd support him, of course, right?
I would support my children. Yeah.
In the 2000s, Phyllis to a different, more racist topic, anti-immigration. She ended up working with Howard Phillips, Doug Phillips' dad. What is this? Was this a referendum?
It was
a committee?
It was a press conference where a bunch of different conservative organizations all got together to express their discontent with the McCain-Kennedy bill, which was an immigration reform act that tried to combine both border protection increases and amnesty and work allowance type increases, where traditionally those were split into bills. They, all at this thing, were arguing in favor of the Sensenbrenner bill, which was the, super fucking draconian border security bill that was just tons of double layer fence, deport everyone, we don't give a fuck about anybody who's not a white American. And they were all like, we love the Sensenbrenner bill. That one's awesome. Vote for that. And that one caused a whole bunch of fucking protests and shit.
So is this a government thing, or
No.
was she just saying her opinion?
This was literally just a bunch of conservative organizations all sent their leaders to the same building to express how much they hated this bill, the McCain-Kennedy bill, and to express their love for the Sensenbrenner bill. That's it. They were literally, it was just a press conference.
Okay.
But there were 4 or 5 of the heads of different, Howard Phillips. There was some guy who ran conservativehq.org. Alan Keyes was there. My grandparents used to really like Alan Keyes. Yeah, it was just, they were all just getting together to tell 3 reporters their opinion. If you look, there's 3 people there.
Okay.
It's very poorly engaged with. So, yeah, press conference. That's what it is.
Well, thank you. Shout out to James, because I didn't have time to watch this clip, and so he did notes for me and clipped some stuff. So here's that.
Now, these guest workers who come in will be able to stay in this country for 6 years. And then the Pence plan says they must choose whether they want to be on the track for citizenship or whether they want to go home. Now, 6 years, that's plenty of time to have a baby or 2 or 3 and establish your family chain reaction. And what if they don't choose? What if they decide just to remain and not make either choice? Well, we're back to the same problem. Is Mr. Pence going to hire buses to deport them at that time? We want people to come to this country who want to be 100% Americans and rise and live the American dream. We don't want this class of cheap labor. And anybody who talks about having the free market with the rest of the world is really talking about making American workers compete with people who work for 50 cents an hour. Administration and people who are pushing these comprehensive bills have absolutely no credibility.
They really want to pretend they're going to give border security with pie-in-the-sky promises, but we want a fence, we want all the technology, and we want the employment verification. We want to close the border before we talk about anything else.
The idea that people will leave if the jobs are denied them, wouldn't that run into the problem that people already have established families here and have U.S. citizen children, and so they would be unlikely to leave because of that?
The so-called anchor babies. Would anyone like to address that issue? Phyllis Schlafly.
Their babies are also Mexican citizens. They're quite free to take their babies with them.
Speaking of Howard Phillips, in the 2010s, if you recall in my Vision Forum video, Phyllis made a surprise appearance in the Vision Forum film, The Monstrous Regiment of Women, which was all about reinforcing gender roles, and how, like, feminists were, like, anti-family Marxist lesbians or something. But Phyllis made a surprise appearance.
The problem with feminism, I think the principal problem, is the cultivation of an attitude of victimization. Feminism tries to make women believe they are victims of an oppressive, male-dominated, patriarchal society. And they really wake up in the morning with a chip on their shoulder.
So in 2011, Phyllis and her son Bruce ended up suing the St. Louis brewery who makes Schlafly beer over the trademark of the name Schlafly, even though the court ruled in the beer people's favor because that was their actual last name and they were actually related to the Schlaflys. So it's just really funny, and it's just so St. Louis. Like, I've never had that beer. I don't like beer, but I'm sure some of you have had it, and it's just like, that's so funny that that's related. Relatives of the late conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly on Monday lost their appeal to block a St. Louis, Missouri craft brewery from trademarking the Schlafly name. In a 3-0 decision, the U.S. Federal Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the St. Louis Brewery, LLC, which was co-founded by Schlafly's nephew, Thomas Schlafly, and had applied in 2011 to trademark the Schlafly name. Circuit Judge Pauline Newman said the name had acquired a secondary meaning and distinctiveness through sales of Schlafly branded beer, and that surnames could be trademarked when that occurred. The brewery began selling beer with the Schlafly logo in 1991, and sales had reached 74.8 million cans, bottles, and draft servings between 2009 and 2014. Phyllis Schlafly and her son Bruce Schlafly, an orthopedic surgeon, had claimed that the trademarking the Schlafly name for beer could hurt their reputations by associating them with alcohol. Their lawyer, Andrew Schlafly, of Far Hills, New Jersey, who was also the son of Phyllis Schlafly, said his clients plan to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's unusual for a company to try to trademark a prominent surname such as this, Andrew Schlafly said in an interview. The law says words that are primarily merely a surname should not be trademarked. Mark Sowers, a lawyer for the brewery, did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The decision upheld in August 2016, ruling by the U.S. Trademark Trial and Appeal Board. But mainly, the most important thing you need to know about Phyllis and the 2010s was she fully backed and endorsed Donald Trump in the 2016 election, and it makes a lot of sense because she loves extremists. She does not believe in, like, the party elites, and her endorsement carries a lot of weight. And so it's really interesting that she did that. And in fact, she wrote a book endorsing him that was published the day after her death. And truly, she was not quite on her deathbed, but very close. Phyllis actually had cancer, and she was in her 90s, and she was very frail and tiny, but still mighty. I mean, you cannot tell her no. Like, she is a very confident and passionate person. And so they brought her out to this Donald Trump rally. Her sons helped her walk to the podium where she gave her endorsement, and then Donald Trump came out and gave her a hug, which I assume she liked very much.
Hello, everybody. I know who you came to see and hear, so I'll be quick. I want to welcome the St. Louis crowd. St. Louis is my city. I was born and grew up here, went to college. And went to school and college in St. Louis. And so it's a great city, and I welcome you all. This is the heart of America, and we're happy to welcome a really great American today. I'll tell you about him in a minute. But I want you to meet Donald Trump. He's I had the chance to meet with him a couple of minutes ago, and I asked him to stand by the Republican platform because we have the best conservative platform we've ever had, and he endorses it. He will stand by it. He is a real conservative, and I ask you to support him. I worked on the platform committee so many times, and I think this is our best one, and we want to maintain it. And it's a great statement for conservatives, and it calls for military superiority. You know, Obama doesn't want us to be superior. He wants to be like everybody else. And I'm confident that Donald Trump will appoint judges like Judge Scalia. That's what we want. So, and I think he has the courage and the energy. You know, I have to have energy for that job. in order to bring some changes and to do what the grassroots want him to do. Because this is a grassroots uprising. We've been following the losers for so long. I was on the floor of the convention when the great Senator Everett Dirksen talked about the kingmakers and said, "We've followed you before and you led us down the road to defeat. But now we've got a guy who's going to lead us to victory." And it's great that he has the endorsement of the best guy in the Congress, who's Senator Jeff Sessions, who knows all about the immigration issue. Donald Trump is the one who has made immigration the big issue that it really is, because Obama's trying to change our country. He's trying to fundamentally transform our country, and we don't want him to do it.
You introduce him now.
All right. They're ready for him now, and this year we have the candidate who really will give us a choice, not an echo. So please give a big St. Louis welcome to Donald J. Trump.
He liked her so much that he actually spoke at her funeral. And he said that Phyllis was there for him, which makes me wonder what their relationship was like.
We're here today to honor the life and legacy of a truly great American patriot. A movement has lost its hero. And believe me, Phyllis was there for me when it was not at all fashionable. Trust me. And in all of her battles, she never strayed from the one guiding principle. She was for America. And it was always, always America first. People have forgotten that nowadays. With Phyllis, it was America first. America has always been about the underdog and always been about defying the odds. The idea that so-called little people or the little person that she loved so much could beat the system, oftentimes the rigged system. You've been hearing a lot about it. That the American grassroots is more powerful than all of the world's special interests, put together, and that's the way Phyllis felt. She loved her country, she loved her family, and she loved her God. Her legacy will live on every time some underdog, outmatched and outgunned, defies the odds and delivers a win for the people. America has always been about the underdog and always been about defying the odds. The idea that so-called little people, or the little person that she loved so much, could beat the system, oftentimes the rigged system. You've been hearing a lot about it. That the American grassroots is more powerful than all of the world's special interests put together. And that's the way Phyllis felt. She's always felt that way. That's the romance of America. That's the story of the mother and the patriot that we honor here today. Phyllis, who is rejoined with her late husband, Fred, is looking down on us right now, and I'm sure that she's telling us to keep up the fight. No doubt about it. Phyllis, we love you, we miss you, and we will never, ever let you down. God bless you, Phyllis. God bless her family. And God bless everyone. Thank you very much.
Donald Trump also talked about Phyllis at his inauguration.
Phyllis Schlafly, the great Phyllis Schlafly, you know who that is. So, she's a great woman, was a great woman. Passed away 6 months ago. I went to her funeral in St. Louis. And she came out against all of her fellow conservatives. And she said, I am not endorsing anybody else but Donald Trump. I don't care what exactly he is. He's like an unknown quantity, but he's going to win. And Reince sort of had the same thing. And Reince was taking tremendous abuse. And I want to thank, by the way, Phyllis, because she went through hell. I'm telling you, Phyllis went through hell in that last period of a year. And she turned out to be right. But
something I want to talk about now is the family infighting. So, Phyllis has 6 kids. The only ones who are going to be relevant to this conversation are Andy, John, and Anne. By the way, Andrew Schlafly, or Andy as he's known, he created Conservapedia, which is the conservative Wikipedia, and also he's behind the Conservative Bible Project, whose goal is to, like, stop the liberalization of translations of the Bible. You know you're too far gone when the Bible is too liberal for you. And in 2016, when Phyllis endorsed Trump, there was a break-off at Eagle Forum because Anne, who was running Eagle Forum at the time, did not support Trump, saying that she didn't think Trump measured up to the conservative standards of the organization, which is also funny because basically now they endorse Trump. Like, they don't say we love Trump on their website, but like they support every single one of his policies, and like, so they might as well have supported Trump. But that caused the Eagle Forum to break off. And so John and Andy liked Trump, and more importantly, John basically was Buster Bluth, and he lived with Phyllis and took care of her, and they were super close. He was also her financial advisor. So, like, of course he's going to go with what his mom says. So they started a group called Phyllis Schlafly's Eagles, and they run the archive and the YouTube, and they have their own website called phyllisschlafly.com, while Anne has eagleforum.com. eagleforum.com has archives of all of the Phyllis Schlafly reports until 2016, and now they have their own newsletter called the Eagle Forum Report. And the brothers who run phyllisschlafly.com And the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, they run the new Phyllis Schlafly report post 2016. It's annoying Republican drama, but I am here for it. I don't know if Anne was ever the president of Eagle Forum. She's currently the chairman, and she served on the Eagle Forum board of directors since 2008. Currently, the president of Eagle Forum is a woman named Kristen A. Ullman. And back in the day, at the time of this split, Ed Martin, who is a Missouri politician, was the president of Eagle Forum, and that's kind of one of the reasons why they split up. Ed Martin used to work for former Missouri Governor Matt Blunt, which, despite having an awesome last name, was not an awesome governor. And more importantly, I just found out that Trump had nominated him, Ed Martin, recently to be the permanent U.S. attorney for Washington, D.C., and because he supported the insurrectionists on January 6th, and because he made controversial comments in 2015 saying that there should be a pause on all immigration because people of some nationalities refuse to assimilate. He also said that he was going to pursue legal action against anyone who interfered with Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. This is also juicy because the day that I'm recording this is the day after Elon broke up with Trump and said that he was in the Epstein papers. What a weird week it's been. So because he was so controversial, he couldn't get the support for this nomination. But it doesn't stop there. President Trump has now picked the former Missouri politician to lead the newly created Weaponization Working Group within the U.S. Justice Department. A document from U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the group will investigate incidents of Justice Department employee engaging in so-called political prosecutions during the Biden administration. He will also work as a pardon attorney for the Deputy Attorney General's office. Martin had been serving as U.S. attorney on an interim basis. The switch happened Thursday after it became evident that a key Republican on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee said he would not vote to confirm Martin. In his place, Trump has nominated Jeanine Pirro, the Fox News lady, to be the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. We are so unbelievably cooked. Disputes among Eagle Forum leaders, including some of Schlafly's children, resulted in court battles starting in 2016. Board members who supported the Donald Trump 2016 presidential campaign left the organization and founded Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, a different 501c4 organization. Phyllis Schlafly Eagles also established a political action committee, Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle PAC. Leaders of the organization sued each other over use of organizational mailing lists, use of Schlafly's name and image, and related issues. In 2017, Eagle Forum declared that Ed Martin, John Schlafly, Andy Schlafly, and Kathleen Sullivan no longer have any connection to Eagle Forum. Ed Martin, president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles and the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund, served as the Republican National Committee Deputy Platform Policy Director in 2024. When it comes to the actual beliefs and topics that both of these groups, the Eagle Forum and then the Eagles, they're basically the same. If I didn't know about the whole backstory, I would think that these were just sister websites, ironically, because it's the brothers. And so it's just crazy because they had this beef in 2016, they have split, even though foundationally they believe the same shit. And it's really interesting because Eagle Forum have the Homemaker Awards, which is basically an award for the who's who of evil men's wives. And let me just read you some of the winners of this award, okay? Okay, so in 2024, Tanya Beck, that's Glenn Beck's wife, won the award. In 2023, Catherine Ballard, that's Tim Ballard's wife. Not to mention, the stuff that he did to the women that he lied to and said that they were a part of a sting, and he sexually assaulted them. I wonder how his wife feels about that, but she won in 2023. Ron Paul's wife, Carol Paul, won in 2015. Tim Tebow's mom, Pam Tebow, won in 2012. Mrs. Pat Boone. Why not? Mrs. Howard Phillips, that's the mom of Doug. Margaret Elizabeth Phillips, known as Peggy, won in 2005. Mrs. Roy Moore, Kayla Kaiser, won in 2003. Mrs. Rick Santorum, Karen Santorum, 2002. Mrs. Todd Aiken, Lulie Aiken, in 2001, and that was 10 years way before the Claire McCaskill, Todd Aiken shit happened. He was the legitimate rape guy. And we have a video about this that I highly recommend you watch. Mrs. James Dobson, Shirley, 1999. Mrs. Michael Ferris, Vicky, one in 1996. Mrs. Mike Huckabee, Janet, 1995. Mrs. Antonin Scalia, Maureen, 1990. And in 1987, what do you know? Betsy North, aka Mrs. Oliver North, won the Homemaker Award. So, congrats to all these lovely ladies. But anyway, on that note, right? I guess the siblings hate each other, or at very least, there's beef between Anne, John, and Andy. They ended up fighting and suing each other over Phyllis's inheritance. Anne is claiming that John and Andy conspired against her and told Phyllis while she was dying that she needed to divert Anne's inheritance money to pay for the legal fees of the lawsuits regarding the IP and trademarks and mailing lists of Eagle Forum. Okay? And then because of this lawsuit, they actually found emails that John and Andy had sent, basically being like, we're going to take Anne down. This is it. We need to be brutal. And all of this is because of Trump. Like, you're going to let that man tear your family apart? This is an article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. In the suit filed this week in St. Louis County Circuit Court, Anne Schlafly Corey claims her brothers got their mother to amend a family trust so that all legal bills in a separate ongoing litigation between the siblings will come out of Corey's share of the inheritance. One of her brothers said Wednesday that the suit was frivolous and designed to generate a news story. The siblings and others were already entangled in litigation stemming from a fight over Phyllis Schlafly's political legacy. That fight came to a head last year when the siblings split over support of Trump in the Republican primary. Phyllis Schlafly publicly backed Trump, a position at odds with Anne Schlafly Corey and other board members of the Eagle Forum, Schlafly's Alton-based conservative think tank. Those board members worried that the aging Schlafly was being influenced by longtime Missouri politico Ed Martin, whom Schlafly had brought in as the Eagle Forum's president, who was an enthusiastic Trump supporter. The board attempted to fire Ed Martin last April based on what members said were management issues, a move Martin has contested in still pending litigation. The board's actions, quote, infuriated Corey's brother, John, Bruce, and Andrew Schlafly, according to Corey's suit. Several lawsuits subsequently were filed in both directions between Anne Schlafly Corey and her allies on the board on one side, and Martin and the Schlafly brothers who support him on the other. Schlafly died September 5th at age 92. It was only after her death, Corey alleges, that she learned her mother had amended her trust to remove Corey as a co-trustee, leaving John Schlafly as the sole trustee. The trust was later amended further with a clause that effectively reduces Corey's share by all lawsuit-related costs. The suit says, in effect, Corey's inheritance was earmarked to go toward paying for litigation against her, the suit claims. The brothers were intentionally misrepresenting Corey's actions and intent to Mrs. Schlafly to get her to amend the trust, Corey's suit alleges. By exerting undue influence over Mrs. Schlafly, John Schlafly and others were attempting to put pressure on Corey to abandon her efforts in the separate litigation. Martin isn't named in Corey's latest suit, but it includes emails between the Schlafly brothers and Martin in which they discuss strategy in their battle with Corey. In one, Bruce Schlafly writes to the others, "Now is the time to go for the jugular, in my opinion, and that means a no-holds-barred attack on Anne, even if it means public sees a family feud." In another email to family members, Andrew Schlafly writes that I am recommending to Mother that she automatically offset the potentially enormous costs of the ongoing litigation from Anne's share of the estate. He then suggests to those family members, you may want to tell Mother likewise. Corey's attorney, Matthew J. Rossiter, declined to comment on the suit. In an emailed statement to the Post-Dispatch, Andrew Schlafly said of his sister, Miss Corey has caused the waste of more than $1 million in legal fees, and she wants someone else to bear those massive costs. Now she is wasting more money on legal fees with this frivolous lawsuit against 17 people. Corey's suit names as respondents 17 beneficiaries of the Phyllis Schlafly Revocable Trust, including minor children in the Schlafly family. In Corey's narrative of her allegations, however, she references only John, Bruce, and Andrew Schlafly, and Ed Martin. Andrew Schlafly, who is a lawyer in New Jersey, said in his emailed statement, the litigation was apparently designed to generate a news story. And pretty much every member of this family is a lawyer, so, I would not want to be involved in the crosshairs of this situation. In 2020, Hulu released the miniseries Mrs. America, which is a dramatic retelling of the Phyllis Schlafly story. I have only seen one episode, and I liked it. There's obviously some different directions they went with it. Like, not everything is historically accurate, but they get the vibe correct, at least from the first episode I saw. And this show has an amazing cast, including Sarah Paulson, Tracy Ullman, Margot Martindale, Uzo Aduba, Rose Byrne, and Olivia Scriven, who you might recognize from Degrassi, and of course Kate Blanchett as Phyllis Schlafly. And Corey Schlafly has spoken out against the show, saying it was inaccurate and they painted her family in an unfair light. Apparently she reached out to the director to try to put some input into this thing to be like more accurate, and the director said, no, I don't want you involved in this, which pissed her off.
What do you make of Kate Blanchett's portrayal of your mother? She is a producer on this project, by the way. Did the filmmakers consult you at all?
No, of course not. Hollywood already has its agenda written before they start production. They know the story that they want to tell. And it's clear that this story that they want to tell in this show is abortion, because they spend 2 episodes really pushing the cause of abortion through the feminist eyes. Now, the Kate Blanchett, she got the wardrobe right, but I think what she missed in Phyllis Schlafly was her warmth, her graciousness, and her true desire to better everybody.
One of the articles that somebody wrote about the Mrs. America show was about something that happened in the first episode, which I did happen to see, and it was a scene implying that Phyllis didn't necessarily consent to a sexual encounter with her husband. Now, obviously, the writers of the show would have no idea what goes on the day-to-day life of Fred and Phyllis. But that might have been based on this quote she had in the 2000s, where she basically denied that marital rape was a thing. And so that might have been the show's writers kind of exploring that topic. However, on the website MrsAmerica.org, which is made by Eagle Forum, which is, once again, different than Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, which is run by the Sons, there's a blog post, doesn't say who it's written by, saying, my dad wasn't a rapist, and I would know, because my bedroom was right next to theirs, which is not the hot take that they thought it was. That's very weird. There's this website called the Real Mrs.America, which is made by John and Andy. It's run by the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, not Eagle Forum, which is interesting. Every time there was a new episode, they'd make a video and like an article being like, this is what really happened.
Hello, my name is Ed Martin, and I'm the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles.
Well, damn, I'm glad I checked their YouTube page because I didn't know Ed Martin was also the president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles.
I had the great privilege of knowing the late Phyllis Schlafly for decades and working with her for years. She was an extraordinary American. She had incredible wisdom, she was wonderful to work with, and a great friend and leader. About a year ago, I heard about a series that was coming out on FX, on Hulu, called Mrs. America. This series was going to star Kate Blanchett, and it's going to purport to cover the ERA fight, and Phyllis Schlafly is going to be one of the central characters. She's Mrs. America. And I thought at that time, boy, I'm not sure I trust FX and Kate Blanchett to tell the story of Phyllis Schlafly that I know. And lo and behold, it looks like they're not telling the truth about Phyllis Schlafly.
And like they always have some little like sniveling thing to say, like, well, you know, they were favoring the feminists over my mother. Wow, I can't imagine why. You definitely see traces of Phyllis in every single type of trad wife we have now. Like, I can't overstate how important she was to that movement, and you know, I can't help but wonder what the American political landscape would be without Phyllis. So, in conclusion, she grew up during the Great Depression. She was a young woman during World War II, making ammunition, and she had children old enough to serve and potentially die during the Vietnam War. Phyllis herself had to work hard and fight for her place in politics and society, yet she never claimed the political stuff as a career because she didn't have to. She did it for the pure love of the game. She was a privileged housewife with a conservative bug up her ass. She accomplished things for the Republican Party that I don't think they could even conceive of today. She did for free what they couldn't even do for money. And I'm not sure if Phyllis ever saw the irony in that. More women's labor that was disrespected and not compensated for. But because her husband came from money, she didn't need to concern herself with thoughts like that. Phyllis was incredibly self-centered and quite frankly racist. Aside from the incredibly racist welfare queen myth that she perpetuated, she campaigned for Barry Goldwater. Phyllis never considered the ways that oppression, discrimination, race, gender, and class intersected for women of color. She didn't care to pander to any other group except for white Christian housewives. And while they were certainly getting fucked over by the patriarchy too, Phyllis believed that women had enough rights already and they needed to just stop making a scene. Even though by the time Phyllis was crusading against the ERA, women in America could still be fired for being pregnant. They couldn't get lines of credit without their husbands co-signing. They couldn't sue for sexual harassment. And most disturbingly, they could not, by definition, legally be sexually assaulted by their husbands because marriage was considered blanket consent unto itself. And like many conservatives today, she had the attitude of, fuck you, I got mine. Meaning that because she worked hard and achieved success, it's other people's fault if they don't succeed just like her. She blamed women for their own abuse by saying that they didn't pick good husbands, and she could not seem to comprehend why a woman would need to work or put their kids in daycare for any other reason besides wanting to live lavishly. Seriously, she said that multiple times. Now, I'm not going to sit here and deny that housewives of the 60s and 70s didn't have their labor or their lives demeaned or even that they were made fun of. These women had legitimate fears about how they would take care of themselves and their families, and they trusted Phyllis to advocate for them. Hell, I can even see how Phyllis jumped to some of the conclusions she did. She was a well-educated lawyer and her job was to interpret laws and apply them to future scenarios. But I also believe that she was a world-class rage baiter and a fearmonger. Phyllis preyed on the fears of housewives and ironically operated within the same social currents as the women's libbers that she hated so much. Both groups wanted protection and freedom for women, but I believe that Phyllis single-handedly changed the narrative about the ERA and organized a powerful voting bloc that had not been taken seriously before. And because of her, more than anyone else, we will never know what life would be like had the ERA passed. The political landscape right now we're in is completely fucked, and I believe that Phyllis played a major role in this. I'm going to point out the irony one more time because her life was full of it. Phyllis believed that women were supposed to be second to men, and yet she routinely outpoliticked, outsmarted, and out-charisma'd the most powerful men in Washington. And with her final breath, she cursed us with Trump, and now she's laughing at us all the way from the gates of hell. Hopefully in my lifetime we'll see the ratification of the ERA, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Truly, I hope that one day we can achieve all of the things that Phyllis hated. Abortion on demand, queer rights, and liberation from the patriarchy. So happy Pride Month. And fuck you, Phyllis Schlafly. We're done. How you guys feeling? So far on my recording over here, it's 3.5 hours. So who knows how long this video is going to be. I worked hard on it and I hope you enjoyed it and I really liked it and I'm very proud of this video. So that's what I'm going to say about that. Words cannot describe how much I appreciate and love the Jenna Knights, and I just love you guys so much. And because I love you so much, I have worked with my childhood best friend, who is also a queer tattoo artist, and she made some amazing designs for you guys that I'm going to talk about now. And all of these are available at fundyfridays.shop. And so let's talk about them. So, of course, we have Rudy, the Pride Month demon. He's a little cupie, and he is gay. And you can get this, well, on a white shirt with black font, or a black shirt with colored font, or white font, anything you want. We have Thank You, Michelle, which is probably going to be a hit, I'm assuming. Now, this has nothing to do with Gay Pride Month, but it's just awesome. And so, you know, I assume gay people are going to enjoy that. But We also have stickers of the Pride Month Demon. I'm probably going to make it into a magnet too. I also made a set of pins, which includes art from Lauren Marvell, who made Overweight Sexually Broken Loser, and Tarot, and Stinkin' Witch, and Bite, because I had to make 5 designs, and I thought those were the perfect for the pins, and I'm really mad because I just looked in my bag, and I'm missing 2 of my pins. It's my own fault. They're lost at my house. But anyway, here's some of the pins. I found the pins, by the way. They were in my box of Christian candy. I have all 5. This is from Gweepers also. This is The Atheist Nightmare, which is a reference to that cursed video of Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron sucking on a banana. The Pride Month Demon is on one of the pins, but I have a picture of it. I don't have it here in my hand. And then, of course, Overweight Sexually Broken Loser. Kind of a girl-defined thing. They didn't say that verbatim. I said it. Vampire Hoe, which is something that Sister Cindy yells at women on campus. So you can take it back and wear that pen. And then, of course, Thank You, Michelle. And we also have Thank You, Michelle mug. And, of course, a Thank You, Michelle magnet, which is not pictured here, but it's on my fridge. Here's one of the stickers. Here's Pride Month Demon sticker and Thank You, Michelle sticker. And we also have a new hat for those of you on a hat journey. This is a reference to something Anita Bryant used to say. But the militant homosexuals don't take no for an answer. Militant homosexuals? How freaking cute. I'm not a hat person, but I think James will wear this because he's also, you know, bisexual. So, of course, in the Pride collection, Lesbian Socialist Republic, which is a reference to the Vision Forum video, and God Loves You in a Gay Way, which is another Sister Cindy reference.
And I love all gay people, just not in a gay way.
So, do you love the Jennonites in a gay way?
I love them in an exclusively gay way. I mean, it's all gay, you know, because it's Fundy Fridays, but love it. And I identify as queer, and I approve this message. We've been working on these for a while, and I was like, you know, what perfect opportunity to launch this than the Phyllis Schlafly episode. Anyway, if you want to support us financially, we have Patreon or YouTube memberships that do the exact same thing. YouTube memberships like integrated with YouTube, so you get slightly different things, like your name is different. You can use emojis in the chat, but they do the same thing. You get Discord access, merch discount, now with free shipping, access to our playlist of unlisted videos. I'm working on a new video right now. I don't have everything for it though, but I'm doing a video with James for Patreon about Christian candy, and I have a bunch of Christian candy, but I don't have it all yet. I'm waiting. I ordered some like marshmallows. We'll see how that goes, but that'll be fun. But otherwise, if you want to support us like emotionally, you can leave a comment, consensually smash that like, share, and subscribe button. And just be yourself. I think if you live your amazing life, gay or not, you're helping the cause of pissing off Phyllis Schlafly. So that's really all we can ask for in life. I'll say it again. I'll say it every single time. I love you guys so much, and I'm so glad you're here, and I love talking to you guys, and I'll see you later. So, bye, gay.